Members of the committee, we're now live.
So I'll call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole Operations. It's now called to order. I'd ask that you rise as you're able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity where righteousness, where freedom prevails, and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us and whose work we must continue in their memory. Thank you. Please be seated. Clerking services tonight are being provided by Chris Jote, who is one of the deputy clerks. Chris, would you please take the roll call?
Through the chair, roll call has been taken.
Excellent. So we'll move into rules of procedure. Just like to remind the committee and our viewing public of a few procedural rules for our virtual meetings, allowing them to operate as efficiently as possible. All members will remain muted during the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on. Staff will request to join the video meeting should the need arise to answer questions of members of the committee. Any member of the committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand button on the participant list screen, bottom right-hand corner. Clerk staff will lower your hand. In the event that a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the committee, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to reestablish quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention that as of last week, Council passed a bylaw amending our procedural rules bylaw. I'd just like to review for you some of those changes. One, you may have heard me refer to this as Committee of the Whole Operations. That's the new title. Staff presentations are now listed under the presentation section of the agenda. Questions during the presentation period portion are not allowed where there's a staff report. So you ask your questions during your speaking turn or turns. All notices of motion must be in writing and submitted to the clerk's department to be included in the agenda on or before the prescribed deadline, which is usually Thursday, 9 a.m. An appeal of a chair's decision on a point of order requires a seconder and is not debatable. A ruling on a point of privilege can be appealed without a seconder and is also not debatable. In reference to points of order and privilege, I should also tell you that I'll be taking a different approach to dealing with members who flout the rules of our procedure. I do this reluctantly. I think you know I do not like to be a heavy-handed chair. However, what happened at last week's council meeting reflects poorly on all of us and cannot and shall not continue. First, however, a quick reminder of one of our most important procedural rules, and that's section 15.7.10. And it states, and I read it, a speaker must confine the remarks to the question in debate. Every decision-making body that follows parliamentary procedure has such a rule. And why? Because it's a fundamental aspect of parliamentary debate that the members exhibit fairness and civility. And it prohibits ad hominem attacks. And that's Latin. It means an attack on a person rather than the subject matter of the debate. Or more simply means you address the subject matter, and commenting on another member's character or implying a deficiency in another member's character or motivation is not allowed in parliamentary debate. That's why that rule is stated the way it is. Also, Rule 15.7.10 states, members are not to resist the rules of council or disobey a decision of the chair or of the council if it's appealed on questions of order and practice. And in the event any member shall resist or disobey, he or she may be ordered by the chair to leave his or her seat for the meeting. But in the event of an apology made by the offender, he or she may, by vote of the council, be permitted forthwith to take his or her seat. And I just read the rule verbatim. And you know, it's been rare that any chair in our history has had to actually enforce that rule. And I don't relish doing it as a chair. You know, I like to think that all the members here have a ton of experience. They know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in parliamentary debate. This is kind of sacred ground for debate. The other kinds of debate can take place outside these council chambers, but not in these council chambers. So control and decorum must be maintained. And I think we've reached the point, unfortunately, where chairs, really, we have no other tool other than what 15.7.10 gives us. I'm loath to actually use it, but if I have to, I will. So let's bear in mind the spirit of parliamentary debate, which is focus on the issue before us and argue to the issue. So with that, members, declarations, conflict of interest. Does anybody have a conflict of interest they need make on any item that's on the agenda tonight? Just physically raise your hand if you don't see it. All right. Well, we do have a busy meeting tonight, so let's first of all deal with the separation of items for consideration and consent that are not otherwise separated. And there are some that are separated because of the presentations and delegations. Item 6.1.1, that's advanced metering infrastructure. There's a presentation on that. 6.1.2, as that's the launch of the climate environmental implications. There is a presentation. 6.2.2, that community physician recruitment, that also will be separated as there is a delegation. So members, is there anybody else who wants any of the remaining matters separated for discussion? Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.1.3, please. That is the standardization of equipment, parts, and supplies.
Okay. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Utley stole half my thunder. 6.1.5 in addition, please.
That's the healthy aging strategy.
It is. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.1.6, please.
The recording of closed sessions. Done. Anything else to be separated? Seeing no more raised hands. Councillor Utley, could you please move the motion to approve all the items for consideration consent that have not been separated?
I most certainly will, Mr. Mayor. If that could be brought up on the screen, please. Thank you very much. Moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor John Celeste, that all items contained for consideration and consent 6.1 and 6.2 not separated for discussion purposes be approved.
All right. Before I call the vote, Chris, would you please read the title of the items that will be caught up into that vote?
Certainly, through the chair, the following items are subject to the vote. Item 6.1.4, road dedication bylaw, Macklin Street and Dennis Avenue, and 6.2.1, minutes.
All right, if you'd please administer the vote.
All items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, Vanderstel, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll now move into the presentations, delegations. And we have 3 delegations and 2 presentations. So we'll move then to, remember, in keeping with the city's procedural bylaw, all comments, the delegators and presenters have to relate to the matter before the committee. So I will deal with the first item 5.1, which is Ray Ann Lynn Arambo, who is the chief librarian, and Mary McKean, who is the chair of the library board. So Ray Lynn, if you could come in, and Marion, if you please come forward then to speak to item 7.1. Please note that you have 10 minutes for your remarks, inclusive of questions of the committee members.
All right, I'll get right to it. Thank you for your time this evening. As noted, I'm Raylyn Arumbro, the CEO and Chief Librarian at the Brantford Public Library, and with me is Marion McGeehan, the Library Board Chair. And there are other board members watching with great interest from home, I'm sure. So we're here at the request of the Library Board. The board passed a resolution earlier this year that confirmed ongoing support for a new library branch in the Southwest Community Center. They provided direction to share project information with City Council and seek support for the project in principle so that when the letter of intent comes forward next month, the library can formally be included and work on the project can continue. Next slide, please. So today I will provide you with the rationale for a new library branch in general, the rationale for a branch in the Southwest Community Center specifically, and key information about the proposed project. Next slide. So the need for a new library branch in Brantford is supported by library studies conducted by independent consultants, an analysis of the library's current collection size, and relevant comparisons to other municipalities. These supporting factors actually speak to the need for multiple new branches to sufficiently serve the city now and into the coming years. But today's focus is making a case for this particular branch. Next slide, please. So 2 library studies have recommended library branch expansions for Brantford to meet current and future community needs. In 2009, a feasibility study recommended adding a new library branch in Brantford by 2015 and a second branch by 2025. The recommended size for each was 13,600 square feet, with one located in the southwest of Brantford and the other in the north. And this past September, the Library Board received a library planning study report that updated the 2009 information. It confirmed the need for new library branches and advised that Brantford's library space deficit exceeds 20,000 square feet now. Both studies drew their conclusions from a range of sources, including community and stakeholder input, public library standards and best practices, and extensive comparisons to municipalities chosen because they are similar in size or nearby geographically. Next slide. The library also conducted an internal review of our collections by applying a widely used benchmarking tool. The analysis revealed that Brantford Public Library falls well below the lowest recommended tier for per capita collection size. A new branch could house approximately 50,000 new items, which would significantly improve the collection deficit. Next slide, please. The library planning study compared Brantford's library services to 20 other communities and revealed that Brantford comes in last place for number of library branches per population served. And not only do all of these municipalities listed have more branches per capita than Brantford, several of them have also formally committed to investing in more location expansions in the near future. Next slide, please. So now I'll make a case for the Southwest Community Center branch in particular. Next slide. The recent library planning study reports that the Southwest is a priority location for a new branch and that a branch there should be 20,000 square feet in size. The consultants were made aware of the Southwest Community Center project and advised that as it stands, the library space for this project is not sufficient to meet the needs in the Southwest. The library board still supports the proposed branch in the Southwest Community Center, however, recognizing that the smaller size of the library can be offset by the opportunity to use other shared spaces within the joint facility. The opportunity for sharing spaces doesn't only benefit the library. For example, the delivery of decentralized municipal social services using a bookable library meeting room is one option being explored for this project that benefits the city as well. Next slide, please. When compared to a standalone facility, it's anticipated there will be capital cost savings for a joint build, particularly for design and construction expenditures. Some savings opportunities for operating costs may be realized through shared service agreements between partners as well. Next slide, please. The library planning study included a community survey that yielded an impressive 1,800 survey responses earlier this year, with good representation from all 5 wards. The survey results showed the Southwest as the preferred location for a new branch. Next slide, please. The library board has referenced the project as a priority when developing every library strategic plan since the 2009 study, and included it in every capital budget submission since that time as well. The project also aligns with recent city council priorities. Next slide, please. If this project does not proceed, the need for a new library branch will still remain. So a different new branch project would need to be proposed. Given the planning study's recommendations, it would likely be a larger branch at a greater cost. This project provides a cost-effective solution in a location that is a priority for service development. The last time that Brantford expanded its number of library locations was when the St. Paul branch opened in 1975. At that time, Brantford's population was 65,000. So 46 years have passed and significant growth has happened. So we know that opportunities like this don't come along often, and they don't come along without planning, and we have been planning for this. Next slide, please. So the final section of the presentation before closing provides key information about the project, although it's important to remember that many details are still not confirmed. Next slide. The library has been a partner in the project for over a decade, formally beginning in 2011 with Council's approval of the North of Shellard Neighborhood and Recreation Plan. You can see several other project activities and milestones laid out in this slide, which all included reference to the public library as a component of the project. Next slide, please. The project is being developed as a single library to be shared by the school and the public library. There are a number of possible operating models for how a public library can share a space with a school library. The Grand Erie District School Board already has a shared public school library in partnership with the Norfolk County Public Library System in Port Dover. That library is open to the public for a range of hours, including during school hours, and also has hours that are dedicated for school use only. This is a mutually agreeable starting place for building our agreement. Next slide, please. The understanding is that the public library's portion for costing will be 10,000 square feet, and the school board's share will be up to 3,500 square feet, for hopefully a total library space of approximately 13,500 square feet. The library will need to include programming space, study rooms for individuals and small groups, library collections, of course, seating for reading and computer access, and all built to accessibility standards. This facility would be the only Brantford Public Library built to accessibility standards, and these standards were a major factor in the planning study's size recommendations. To comply with library shelving accessibility standards, it takes more space now to hold the same amount of library materials. Next slide. The library board recently approved the 2020 capital budget submission that included $6.7 million for 10,000 square feet in the Southwest Community Center in 2023. This total is based on the Class D estimates from 2018, updated for cost increases since that time. In contrast, the capital cost for a standalone 20,000 square foot branch, as recommended in the recent study, was estimated at $14.2 million. The project is eligible to be funded 100% by development charges. Currently, $3.3 million in development charges is already available, specifically earmarked for growth-related library expenditures, and future DCs can continue to be applied to this project. Next slide, please. It's important to note that operating and shared service agreements with the school board and city that have not yet been developed are going to affect the operating budget. For example, opening hours for the library are currently unknown and will significantly impact staffing costs. As such, the estimated operating costs may best be presented as a range between $450,000 and $550,000 annually. This works out to a city operating budget increase of about 0.3%. And depending on the time of year when the facility opens, this increase may be phased over 2 years. Next slide, please. So we've established that Brantford does not have enough library locations to meet standards and best practices. We've outlined the benefits of a branch in the Southwest Community Center and provided preliminary costing and planning information. We know that because Brantford does not have enough library locations, many residents don't even know what they're missing. They grew up without convenient access to a library branch and without benefiting from our services. Next slide, please. So we'll close with some words from people who do know what a difference the library can make for individuals and the community because they've experienced it. This is just a small sample of the hundreds of responses received when we conducted the community survey earlier this year. So thank you for your time. That's my presentation. It was a lot to cover in a short amount of time. I'm not sure that I have time left for questions, but I'm happy to prepare further information if requested.
Raylene, we're cutting it close, but there may be a motion to allow that during debate. But we've got about 40 seconds. Anybody want to ask any questions? Not seeing any raised hands. Thank you very much, Raylene, but please stay around. It's possible the committee could decide to waive its rules and allow you to respond to any questions that come out during the debate.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll now move to the delegation regarding item 5.2, which is we have with us Jennifer Miller, who is the administrator of the John Noble Home, Shelley Prue is the financial manager, and Phil Goodfellow, who is with the architects. And so if we could bring, please, the representatives of John Noble Home in. There's Ms. Miller.
All right.
Are you ready to go, Jennifer? Or are you bring anybody else with you into the meeting?
So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today the Belcourt redevelopment update. My name is Jennifer Miller, as you've heard, I'm the administrator here at John Noble Home, and I have with me Shelley Prue, who's our financial services manager. So next slide, please. So just some background, Belcourt is a vacant unit that's been in the home and has sat empty for many years. It was a decision of council to redevelop the unit into a behavioral unit as there was a large growing need within the community for behavioral beds. The home was approved for 20 long-term care beds, actually in 2 installments, one in 2018 for 10 beds and another for another 10 beds in 2019. So we began planning the new unit, but however, construction the unit was halted due to the global COVID-19 pandemic. But with new insights from the pandemic, a new design has been drafted, and it meets the needs of the behavioral residents, as well as meeting needs of possible future pandemics and infection control standards. So a higher level of environmental design was required. So next slide, please. So why behavioral unit? Well, individuals who display responsive behaviors are often denied entrance to long-term care facilities as they're unable to integrate in populations of the home. So they often pose a risk, their behaviors pose a risk to themselves and others. And so individuals with dementia are also twice as likely to be hospitalized. They're twice as likely to visit emergency departments. And once hospitalized, they're more than twice as likely to have alternate level of care days. Also, 2 out of every 3 residents in long-term care have dementia. And as this dementia progresses, they often develop responsive behaviors. And they are then forced to go to behavioral units as homes cannot deal with increasing behaviors when staff are ill-equipped to deal with them. Next slide, please. Also, there's a lack of specialized behavioral units in the community, which is also compounded by the number of residents who require, or individuals who require this care. And they're often forced to leave to other centers. So individuals are forced to relocate, which causes stress to the family and who are often elderly and then have to travel or forced to travel and may not even because of restrictions. Next slide, please. So here's a rough design that was recently approved by our Committee of Management. And you can see just a few highlights about it. We do have a circular inner walkway. So the circular design allows the residents to wander without stress. It decreases agitation. You'll also see that there's an inner courtyard, which is a safe way for individuals with dementia to be able to have access to outdoor space. This particular design has outdoor views from every room, and it also allows residents to have ample outdoor lighting. The other pieces for the pandemic-friendly section of it is that the design is actually able to split into two 10-bed clusters. So we have, you can see within the inner courtyard itself, a line which actually, it can also be split into two 10-bed clusters. So in addition to increase the pandemic-friendly functions, we have enlarged dining rooms and enlarged recreation rooms, which allow for social distancing. Next slide, please. So some key features of the design: it is a demolition of the existing Belcourt and new construction and the efficiencies that that brings with it. It is two 10-bed pandemic-ready subclusters. There's the water loop, as I described, a secure inner courtyard, and at the request of the Committee of Management, we are exploring feasibility of having a second floor for future expansion options. Next slide, please.
So thank you, Jennifer, and good evening. I'm Shelley Broom. I'm Financial Services Manager of the Home, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the financing aspects of the project. So the total estimated project costs at this time are approximately $10.2 million. The province provides a number of one-time funding amounts. The Home will receive a one-time payment of $250,000 for proposal development. The Home will also receive an approximately $878,000 cash reimbursement, and that amount is actually based on the total project costs. The current capital plan has just over $2.3 million for this project, and after factoring in above one-time monies, a total of approximately $6.7 million will be required for this project. The province also provides a per diem over 25 years, and that per diem can be utilized to fund any debt should the municipalities wish to take out a debenture for this project. The annual per diem will amount to $160,819. So if the municipalities decide to debenture, an additional $215,000 annually would be needed to support debenture payments. The Committee of Management directed staff to recommend options for funding. Staff looked at our 10-year capital plan to support an additional $250,000 in annual debenture payments should the municipality wish to choose that option. And we have put forth a revised 10-year capital plan. Next slide, please. So progress to date. So as Jennifer mentioned, a feasibility study was done, and the Home looked at the advantages of renovation versus a new build, and the decision has been made to go with the new build for a number of reasons, mostly through lessons learned through the pandemic. As a result, the committee has chosen a new build, which provides increased dining and enhanced infection control measures. The Committee of Management at this time has also requested that staff investigate options which will allow for the ability of a future second floor expansion and its associated costs. And I'll turn it back to Jennifer.
So next slide, please. So next steps is approval of the project and capital funds through the 2020 capital budget process in the city and county. Then we would submit drawings to the Ministry of Long-Term Care for their approval. Next, we would execute a redevelopment agreement with the city and the county and the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And we're also hoping to submit an application for behavioral unit designation, which would also potentially have some more operating funding tied to that. And from there, we would proceed to construction activities, which would be working drawings, submissions, ministry submissions, tenders, etc., and preparing for the anticipated opening for an admission of our first resident, January 2024. Next slide, please. And I'm open to questions, and I'm not sure how long that took.
Actually, we have about almost 2.5 minutes for questions. So are there any members? Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This is good news. I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but I can't recall whether or not I saw a proposed elevator shaft in the floor plan of the main floor of the building. I know we talked about it earlier. Is that part of your plans as well, just in case we get the opportunity to put a second floor on that both of you mentioned?
So through the chair, yes, we at our last committee of management meeting, it was requested that we explore those options. And so that's what for the next committee management, we will be presenting some options with the possibility of putting on a second floor.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Jennifer. The costing for the expansion of the dining room and the I forget what the other, there was 2 items. Was it recreation area? There was 2 items there. Is that covered in this budget, or would that be above and beyond the cost of this expansion?
So through the chair, that would be covered as the cost we presented.
Okay, and I guess just secondly, and more of a comment, maybe you can comment back to me. It seemed to me that through COVID, we realized there was a weakness in the system, or the province did, and they're putting in millions and millions of dollars, and yet it doesn't seem. I know for-profit homes seem to be getting funding to build new facilities and build all these things, and we're getting kind of the skinny chicken out of this whole deal. And yet, I think when it was demonstrated through the pandemic, municipally run and not-for-profits did far better in managing and in looking after our senior population. That it just seems as there's an unfair distribution of funds going on provincially that's coming locally. Can you comment on that? Is that just my perception, or is that what's going on?
So through the chair, it would be difficult for me to comment on that. We have applied to the ministry for the funding that we have received, and I'm really not aware of the distribution of the funding to for-profit or not-for-profit at this point. I don't have that information.
Well,
Okay.
Jennifer,
Thank you.
Nicely handled, a diplomatic response to that difficult question. So thanks very much, Jennifer. But please, if you might hang around a bit, we'll likely, assuming no one has any objections, be dealing with you as the second matter that we'll be debating. And it could possibly be that members might want to ask you some further questions. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
In the waiting room, please.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move then to the third delegation. We have representatives from the Brant Community Healthcare System and also the Community Physician Recruitment Committee speaking to item 6.2.2. So we could bring those representatives forward. There we are. And I think we have Mr. Bradford there.
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Do you plan on
Okay.
hiding in the wings? That would be here.
No, I'm right here.
There you are.
There we go.
Good. All right. Well, if you please introduce yourselves to the committee, and then you have.
I'm going to allow most of the presentation of our time is going to be for our recruiter, and I'll explain the background or in anticipation of that. Mr. Mayor, thank you, and councillors, particularly Councillor Utley, who was on our committee through this last very difficult 18 months. And COVID did have a significant impact insofar as many doctors did not follow their career path because of COVID. They were in demand and they worked in other areas, and they worked to serve as a frontline individuals rather than working in different communities. So that was the first point. The second point is that we had our recruiter retire, so we miss Alice. Alice Preston has been a phenomenal asset within our group for the last decade, and Allison has decided she and her husband wanted to spend some time with each other during their own retirement. So that created some significant changes, one of them being that, in fact, the hospital supplied us with an interim recruiter, Karen, Koger, and Karen supplied the necessary connections to be able to manage during the time as the hospital and our committee pursued a new candidate. And from that process, in the short list, we came up with a unanimous candidate, and it's Lebene Numekavor, and you'll meet her in a moment. And I look forward to what she has to say. It's been a phenomenal asset for us. And during that same time, as we had indicated to you the last year when we spoke to you, we've invested significantly into social media through branding, marketing, website development, and promotion, which has been extremely successful, which will be part of Lebene's report as well. The other thing that I think I just want to put on the table, you may choose to discuss it, is the relationship with the county. We have no relationship with the county for their search, although their hub system is in progress. They're expecting to move shortly or in the spring into a new building, and we have no relationship. They are not part of our funding. Neither do we do any research or any recruiting on their behalf, despite the fact that one individual, private individual within the community, chose to try and recruit Alice at the time as though she would work for both groups, and that did not happen. In addition, there was another attempt when Lebene came in that the county decided they wanted to see what Lebene could do on their behalf as well, which again resulted in we are solely funded by the city, the municipality of Brantford, and our response is strictly on that behalf. In light of that, I'd like to welcome Lebene Numekavor, and she will go through with the presentation at this particular point, and we welcome any questions afterwards. Lebene.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and give you guys my presentation. I'll try to stay on time. Next slide. So this is all pretty much what John has already spoken to, so I won't give too much of the background. This is my first meeting, but I know it's not all of your first, so you kind of know the background and understanding of the work that we do with the Family Physician Task Force, which is the recruitment of family physicians to the city of Brantford specifically. And these are the different members that we have that are participating in the community and supporting us. Next slide. So John spoke to some of this as well in his introduction. So as you know, obviously there's been a lot going on over the last year and a bit with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted our ability to recruit in the methods that we had previously. There has also been the impact with the departure of Alice Preston during this time that has impacted things as well. Throughout the pandemic, a lot of things transitioned to virtual, which meant it was a bit more difficult to contact or make those connections with the leads that we had previously been able to take advantage of in the past through the in-person events. And so this was part of the reason why, and part of the benefits of having the new marketing and media strategy allowed us to adjust. And so I'll speak a bit more to that later, but it is something that had definitely obviously impacted our ability to recruit and connect with family physicians throughout the country and throughout the region over the last year, I say to 18 months. Next slide. So as I mentioned, and as John mentioned, in February, Alice Preston retired from her role, and I did not start in this role until July. So there was a bit of gap, which during that time was covered by another person working in my Department of Medical Affairs at the Brant Community Healthcare System, Karen Arnott, who supported us during that time. Just a brief background about me. I did come from Trillium Health Partners, so I do have a healthcare background, mainly in medical affairs, and I've come into this role supporting the recruitment of family physicians in addition to the role at the Brant Community Healthcare System. Next slide. So that being said, I would like to note, even though things haven't been the norm and it has been a bit more difficult to get our name out there, we have had an extremely successful year over the last year with the recruitment of family physicians. So we've actually been able to recruit 11 new family physicians to the city of Brantford, which is phenomenal. A number of those physicians, 6 were hospitalists coming to the hospital and 5 being family physicians going into practice. Should also note that of those physicians coming in, 8 of the 11 were additional new physicians to the organization versus 3 being a replacement for retiring or leaving physicians in the organization. And as I mentioned previously, it's really the new marketing and media strategy that has allowed us to widen our reach, because we've actually been able to still get candidates across the country, including people reaching out to us from British Columbia, as well as people reaching out to us from the UK and other areas that have allowed us to connect with them as well. And we've still, as things have sort of opened up, we've also been able to take advantage of a few in-person recruitment events over the last couple of months that have also been beneficial. Next slide. So our plan for 2022 is to continue our recruitment. We are targeting the same, around minimum of 5 new family physicians to the area, to 10 that we're looking to bring in. And we're hoping to take advantage of expanding our new marketing and media strategy by using the brand new customized branded recruitment materials, doing some targeted custom events at the medical schools and residents, taking advantage of the new graduates that are coming up, trade shows that are opening up as things with COVID have opened and allowed us to attend in person, as well as increasing our focus and reach in general. Other key activities that we are working on is actually working directly with Ontario Health for their supports to bring in additional physicians to the city, getting more information from them on the sort of current gaps and better understanding the current state within the organization as well. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to discuss with you guys for today. There is more information in the deck. I have included copies of some of the branded materials that we have put together. We have a brand new website that is live that you're able to get more information and get contact information from as well as our plan overall that has been submitted to the committee as well. So I'll now pause here and open it up for questions. I see 2 hands.
Yes, thank you, Levine. And we do have about 2 minutes. So Councillor Utley, you're first.
May I just suggest it's Lebene?
Well, Lebene.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lebene, thank you for your presentation. It's a pleasure to meet you, and hopefully we'll meet in person sometime soon. Can you, and hi, John, but not forget John. What were the main reasons the 11 physicians chose Brantford?
I would have to speak with them on an individual basis. I think the reasons have varied. I think from my contacts that I've had with people actually really do like the city of Brantford itself. So there are a lot of different things. I know the younger people that are coming, they're looking for areas where they can buy housing that is more affordable in comparison, I guess, if we're looking to other areas of the province. So there's some benefits to coming that way. And it also is just a general beautiful area. Younger people are also really interested in the trails and the other things that are available in the city as well. And also, I think the pull is, the FOs or the groups of physicians that we have practicing right now are bringing in people, which is what people are looking for. They're looking to join practices. They don't want to be out on their own like they previously were. So the benefit of being able to join and work with established groups is also a pull. So that helps. And also, I think the final thing is that in other areas, they're actually at a point where when physicians are retiring, they're selling their practices. So in order for you to take over, you actually have to buy into that. So fortunately, in Brantford, we're not at that point where they're actually able to still take over without having to actually purchase the roster of patients from that person.
Thank you, and good luck with your role.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Sluss, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to John, if I could. John, I noticed with interest that, well, firstly, I heard you say that there's no financial participation from the county, and yet I see the mayor of the county sitting on your board. I wondered, is that an oddity, or is he there as a citizen as opposed to a politician?
Thank you very much. We have, of course, the representative from the municipality of Brantford, John Utley, is on the board. And a number of years ago, there was an attempt and an interest to develop a relationship with the county with their ability to be able to add funding to the process. That never happened. The mayor himself agreed to be on the committee as long as there wasn't a conflict. And so he was part of the development of the website. All the images are Brantford. He knows that. And I've had discussions with he and the CAO, and they didn't feel that there was any funds available. So at this point, his role is primarily is to give us some kind of an insight into the impact of changes of demographics within the county, which surrounds, of course, Brantford. And we do get that information, but we're not there to serve the needs of the doctors or the new the hub that's been developed.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Lenny. So please, you'll likely be the third item that we'll be discussing after we hear from two more presentations. So please hang around. There could be possibly additional questions may come your way. We can't be sure at this stage, but.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome back. I see you go one wing, but you're here.
Yeah, hopefully not much longer. So thank you very much. And as I said, please hang around. We may need you in about half an hour, I think. So, all right, let's move on to, we have two presentations, staff presentations. First is in reference to item 5.1.1. We have Selvia, our Director of Environmental Services. And I believe, oh, there's Joel. So Selvia and Joel, if you would please introduce yourself, and under the new rules, you have 10 minutes to present. And remember, members, you ask your questions during your speaking portion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity today. I'm here with our project consultant, Joel Cardy, to present the Advanced Water Meter Infrastructure and Water Meter Replacement Project. As the name says, the project has two parts to it. One is replacement of old water meters, and the other is adding the advanced meter technology. Council heard from high water bill customers, and we have technology today to address those issues and provide excellent customer service. The vision is our customers can see their water consumption and their water bill real time, even from their phone or a computer. They can set alerts for leaks, excess water use, so they have a control of their water bill. The city retained Diameter Services to investigate technology options and present and prepare implementation plan. Diameter has extensive experience in the advanced meter technology in Ontario, Canada, and US. They're here to present. I'll give the presentation to Joel Cardy now. Joe?
Thanks very much, Selvia. My name is Joel Cardy. I'm with Diameter Services. Next slide, please. The city was clear in their project goals. The purpose of this project was to enhance customer service, improve the billing and collection process, use hourly consumption data to better understand water loss, and have a system that can help with future water conservation needs. Next slide. The city has, yeah, just right there. The city has 35,000 water meters that are read manually. This is moving to, it's read bi-monthly. This bi-monthly reading process is moving to monthly come January due to some of the high water bill complaints that has been received. The initial phase of this project was to perform a detailed design and evaluate the alternatives. Next slide, please. The outcome of the design, so the recommendations were to first implement the advanced metering technology and water meter replacement at a cost of $12 million. Second is to implement the project over an accelerated schedule of 42 months, maximizing the economies of scale, delivering consistent and customer service levels, avoid technology changes over time, and to achieve the business drivers that the city's project team has identified. Ultimately, this will improve the customer experience through new customer-facing tools. Next slide, please. Currently, the water meter, the technology that is being used is currently the water meters are manually read. A person visits each property, touches a device on the outside of the property, and transfers a single meter reading to the handheld. This meter reading is used for billing purposes and is the technology. So next slide, please. And one more, please. The technology that we're going to be doing is called Advanced Metering Infrastructure, or AMI, which is the acronym I'll use quite a bit in this presentation. It adds a radio transmitter to the outside of the property. These small devices will communicate to a fixed network, which will pass data to new software applications. Ultimately, the technology will collect 720 hourly readings per month per customer. The AMI technology requires additional software applications to transfer data and transform it into usable information. This information will be used to eliminate the manual reading process and make the billing and reading process much more reliable and efficient. Next slide, please. The project of this nature goes through several phases. We have completed the design phase of the project. During the first phase, we completed 14 different tasks with the city's project team. Wanted to ensure that the needs of the city of Brantford were fully understood. The city's team had a clear understanding of the available technologies and identify any system or resourcing implications that would be required in order to make the project successful. Once approved, the project team will move into a procurement phase of the project, where technology and service providers will submit their RFPs. Once the RFPs and then once an AMI technology has been selected, then you would move into the startup and proof of concept phases of the project. Next slide, please. During the design phase, we wanted to ensure that the project was well aligned with the city's customer service objectives and the water and wastewater master servicing plan. We found that the city's goals and objectives were well supported about this project. From a customer service perspective, those on the left, this project will allow the city to respond to customer requests in a more timely and accurate manner, making the city more customer-centric. The project will also apply technology to improve the manual business processes currently being used. On the utility-facing side, this technology can be used to improve customer service, better manage the distribution system, i.e. water loss, create efficiencies in meter reading, and provide more revenue protection tools to the water utility. Next slide, please. This project will improve the customer experience of the water customers. There'll be fewer water bills. There'll be fewer estimated water bills. There'll be earlier notification of higher than normal consumption prior to receiving higher water bills. New communication methods will be employed through a customer portal. Access to hourly consumption data will allow customers to impact their consumption behavior. Will eliminate unnecessary entry on private property to gain meter readings, and it'll better support industrial customers for water data, allowing them to reduce and conserve water in the future. Ultimately, it'll help support water conservation programs. Next slide, please. Now, this technology being assessed is not new. A good percentage of North American water utilities are already implementing or considering implementing this technology. The list on the left are utilities with completed AMI rollouts. The ones on the right are AMI technologies that are currently being considered or deployed. Next slide, please. So the total cost of the project is $12 million. It has about an 18-year payback, so the project will pay for itself over time. It includes the products, software applications, and installation services. This number also includes internal and external project support to ensure the project's success. During the design phase, we identified tangible financial benefits, reduced meter reading costs, improvements in meter accuracy, which will translate into revenue improvements. As well, it will adjust the meter replacements, ongoing meter replacement costs the water utility typically does. There's also a number of non-tangible benefits, including customer service improvements, daily data that provides actionable intelligence to the utility, water loss improvements on the distribution side. There'll be a reduction in carbon due to elimination of manual meter reading, and there will be a number of applications that better engage customers. Ultimately, we're anticipating a reduction in budget of about $480,000. There'll be some new application and software costs at a cost of $218,000 per year. So a net savings of about $262,000 per year. Next slide, please. So it is recommended to implement the project between 2022 and 2025, going through the various phases of the projects we've already discussed. We recommend the water customer engagement throughout this process, starting with a public information center in December of 2021. Once the contractor and technology are selected, we would add additional information to the website to provide customers with some more information about the project and technology being implemented. Once the project begins, we'll have an open house to allow customers an opportunity to ask questions about it. A booklet will be developed to provide information to the customers. The contractor will solicit for appointments through letters and door knockers and phone calls. And once the meter has been installed, the customer will be given access to enhanced customer portal with new improvements to the customer experience being made available. Next slide, please.
Joel, can you wrap it up in about 10, 15 seconds?
This is my last slide. So these are the next steps that are on the slide. We expect the project to start in Q3 of 2022, finishing in Q1 of 2025.
Great, thanks very much, Joel and Selby. And just a reminder to committee members, the rules have changed, so all questions are held until your speaking portion where we have a staff presentation that's backed up with a staff report. So, but we've gone beyond 10 minutes anyway. So thank you very much, Selby and Joel. We'll deal with this sometime later this evening. So the last presentation we have, staff presentation, is in reference to 6.1.2, which is the launch of the climate environmental implications. And we have Rochelle Rumney, our climate change officer. There she is. Rochelle, the floor is yours, up to 10 minutes. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Davis and members of council. My name is Rochelle Rumney, and I'm the climate change officer at the city. I'd like to introduce you to the new section that's been implemented for staff reporting on council information, which is the climate and environmental implications section of the staff report template. Next slide, please. So you've likely already seen this new section in some of the reports provided for your review this evening. This process came into effect on November 1st, 2021, as a result of the climate emergency declaration made by council in 2019. Within that declaration, there was direction to staff to develop a carbon reduction strategy in collaboration with the Environmental and Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee that details a process to ensure that every matter coming before City Council will quantify and report its impact relative to the climate emergency and Brantford's carbon reduction strategy. So that carbon reduction strategy itself has been developed, which is the Climate Change Action Plan. And this process described tonight is the quantification and reporting mechanism described in section F1 of the Climate Emergency Declaration. Next slide. This new staff reporting consideration involves two components. One is the new section itself that will be included in all committee reports, council reports, task force reports, etc., much like the financial considerations section is now. The other component that has been developed to assist with this section is a climate and environmental calculator tool to quantify and collect metrics in these areas. And I'll elaborate on both pieces here. Next slide. The new staff report section is included in the template as section 11, titled Climate and Environmental Implications, directly below the financial implications as seen here. When staff started reporting eScribe, this section will be included, along with some guidance and a link to the calculator tool. The section itself is open for all staff to use to discuss climate and environmental impacts, but the quantification process is only required for public works and housing operations for the first year, because the majority of corporate emissions are from buildings and vehicles operated by these departments. Other departments are welcome to use the tool and include quantified emissions and other metrics, but it's not required at this time. Next slide, please. So this table gives an overview of the type of data required, which departments are required to provide it, and some examples of topics that might be included in these categories. Qualitative data is a description and high-level explanation of impacts without any measured data. This can include things like a description of strategies used to address possible impacts, policy changes that could affect behavior, opportunities for increased walking or cycling, or ecological impacts, or other discussion points that are hard to quantify. This type of discussion is required for all departments if applicable to the report. But some reports, for example, like many HR reports dealing with staff changes, may not have impacts on climate or the environment, and so they can simply say there will be no impact. Quantitative data is measured data that will require an estimated value to be provided. At this stage, we are collecting quantitative data on any expected GHG emissions from energy use, such as electricity and natural gas, etc., and tree planting or removal, water demand, waste production, and stormwater impacts. These items are all climate or environmental issues that we can begin to quantify so that we can measure our current status and work toward improvements. As mentioned earlier, this requirement only applies to public works and housing operations for the first year. Next slide, please. This is a view of what the calculator tool looks like. It has been developed to assist staff with calculating emissions and the climate and environmental considerations for staff reports. It is created on SharePoint with many hours of work invested from IT services. Data is entered into the various sections that are relevant to the report and to the project, and a report with results is emailed directly to the staff person that authored it. This tool calculates emissions from associated energy use and or tree impacts, and it also collects this data in a back-end database to allow for easy compilation for quarterly reporting requirements. Next slide, please. The parameters for data collection and quantification are important so that we understand exactly what the data is telling us. Firstly, climate and environmental metrics gathered through the process are for operational impacts only. We won't be calculating impacts for construction or demolition phases of the project at this time. This may be added in the future. For example, if we're talking about a building project, the emissions from construction vehicles will not be included. Only emissions from the electricity, natural gas, and other energy used in the operation of the building. During the operational period, annual impacts as well as lifetime impacts will be provided. So if the building is likely to be operational for 25 years, we will multiply the annual impacts by 25 to get lifetime impacts in terms of GHG emissions, water use, etc. One other piece of information that will be provided in relevant cases is a comparison to the current state. For example, a building renovation project, we can compare to the existing building's energy use and calculate the change in emissions from the current state, either positive or negative. Next slide, please. So the topics shown here will be the information that's collected through the tool and the units of measurement that will be collected, as well as areas where there will be resulting emissions calculations measured in tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. You can see that the emissions are only calculated for energy use and trees, but quantitative measurement will still be required for the remaining metrics to begin tracking in these areas. Next slide, please. This slide shows the resulting report that is emailed to staff. This is not the full report shown here, but one has been included as an appendix in the staff report that supports this presentation. It contains all the information entered into the tool, as well as the resulting calculations. It contains both qualitative and quantitative data for inclusion in the staff report itself and quarterly update reports. Next slide, please. So based on the resulting email report from the tool, staff can extract relevant data for inclusion in section 11 of the staff report to discuss climate and environmental implications related to their project. An example section has been provided in full in the staff report presented tonight, but I've included some highlights for the example police retrofit and expansion project. Discussion should include qualitative information shown here in brown and quantitative information shown in green, and tell the story of what the impacts are likely to be and what mitigating efforts have been made. Each report will be different, and I will be providing training and guidance to staff to help sort through what information is suggested for this section as we learn this process together. Next slide, please. The quarterly reports will gather any data that has been entered into the calculator tool and provide a summation of the previous quarter's metrics and some qualitative information as appropriate. This will be an opportunity to show overall impacts of multiple decisions, as well as an opportunity to highlight great initiatives the city has approved that will reduce emissions and improve other areas of sustainability. These reports will be provided to both SPAC and Committee of the Whole, and year-end reports will provide annual results, as well as some context with regard to the emissions reduction targets and other sustainability goals in place at the time. Next slide, please. One of the main benefits of the program is increased climate and environmental literacy, as well as increased monitoring and tracking of data. As staff, council, and the public become more familiar with seeing this data, we will become better at interpreting this information and understanding where we can improve. Values of GHG emissions may not mean much at the beginning until we establish a basis for comparison. To start, this can be provided by looking at some common examples that we're all familiar with, such as those provided here. Information such as this will be provided to staff for their use and interpretation of GHG values as we begin to gain experience in this area. For example, the average residential home emits about 4 tons of carbon dioxide a year from electricity and natural gas used in their home. And on the other end of the scale, the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center emits almost 1,900 tons of carbon dioxide because it has to heat pools and create ice, etc. This type of scale will help us place the level of impact of new projects and help council to determine an appropriate response. Next slide, please. But finally, I wanted to mention that this tool and quantification and discussion process is in a testing period and will be reviewed after 1 year to understand if it's producing the intended results, if it's easy to use and understand, and where we can improve. We'll gather feedback from council, staff, and SPAC on the results, reports, and the tool itself, and we can revise and continue to improve the process as we learn more. We'll also discuss if additional departments should be included in the required calculation process at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. I see Councillor Antosky, you've asked to ask a question, but again, with the rule change we made last week, because the staff presentation is backed up by a staff report, questions are to be asked during members speaking portions. So that completes delegations and presentations. So we'll now consider those items and the items that were separated for discussion purposes. Councillor Antosky, please read the motion to place all separate items for consideration consent on the floor for discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Carpenter that all items for consideration and consent 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved. All right.
Thank you. And if no one objects, we'll follow our usual procedure. We'll deal first with 7.1 and 7.2 as there were delegations, and also 6.2.2 position recruitment. And then we'll move on to deal with the other separated items. So we'll then move to item 7.1, which is in reference to the Public Library Board presentation. And there is a motion which is not on the floor yet because it's in section 7. So Councillor Utley, I think you've got the resolution. If you would please move it, state your seconder, and read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be delighted to move this motion. So moved by myself and seconded by my library partner, Councillor Joshua Wall, Ward 5. Whereas on September the 8th, 2021, the Southwest Community Centre Task Force recommended that staff be directed to put the inclusion of the library in phase 3 of the Southwest Community Centre and Park project on hold, pending approvals from the Library Board and City Council confirming whether the library portion of the project will be included. And whereas the following resolution was passed by the Library Board on May 20, 2021. Whereas library studies, library standards, and municipal comparisons indicate a need for library location expansion in Brantford. And whereas the Southwest Community Centre project provides the library with an opportunity to meet established needs in the southwest of Brantford. And whereas a library facilities master plan will help to identify additional options and plans for meeting further community needs. Be it resolved that the Library Board confirm continued commitment as a partner in the Southwest Community Centre project in the pursuit of a shared facility with the City of Brantford and the Grand Erie District School Board. And that library staff be directed to provide Brantford City Council with information relating to the establishment of a new library in the Southwest Community Centre with the goal of confirming council support for funding the project. And further, that library staff be directed to work with the City of Brantford Facilities Management and Security Department to develop a library facilities master plan informed by the pending 2021 library planning study final report. And whereas a library planning study was submitted to the library board on September 23, 2021, and whereas the library planning study shows Brantford has the highest population served per branch out of 21 comparator libraries, indicating relatively the poorest level of service in terms of facilities. And whereas the library planning study reports an immediate need for a new library branch in Ward 1 of the city with a recommended size of approximately 20,000 square feet. And whereas the Brantford Public Library Board supports the development of a new library branch in the Southwest Community Centre to address the need for a library in the southwest of Brantford at a reduced footprint of 13,500 square feet, shared with the Grand Erie District School Board. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the city endorse the inclusion of the library portion in the project, and B, that city staff be authorized to sign a letter of intent jointly with the library to the Grand Erie District School Board to indicate the intent to continue to pursue a shared facility in the Southwest, and C, that city staff be directed to work with library staff on the development of a new library branch in the Southwest Community Center. If I may, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
May I continue?
Yes, please continue.
Thank you. I just want to thank our Brant Public Library Chair and board members and staff for their dedication and support and with their presentation this evening. And could you put me down for a second speaking opportunity, please?
Certainly. Just a reminder to committee members, if you want to ask any questions of the delegates, we'd have to have a motion on the floor to do that and to waive the rules and 2/3 vote. I'm just reminding you, we've got that option if you want to ask questions. So next on the speakers list, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. My entire life, my family has used the library as a place to read books. But it wasn't until I joined this council and joined that board that I realized just how much a library does for a community, all of the numerous different things that they do to make the quality of life of the people they serve better. And I want to echo Councillor Utley's statement. Huge thank you to the staff and volunteers and people who make the library the place that it is, both our locations and hopefully soon to be our third location. I do hope that this council can support this motion tonight, because every single citizen of this community should have easy access to a library and everything that a library offers.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted some clarity. I believe the report indicated that the building of a new library where it's being built is 100% DC funds funded. But there's a shortfall, I believe, of I believe it's 3 million something. Is that shortfall anticipated to be debentured, or I presume as we collect DCs, the portion that goes to libraries would be constantly reducing that mortgage, but I don't know exactly how that would work. If perhaps Joelle, if you could explain it. Like, I don't think we need a conventional 20-year mortgage or whatever. We need something that bridge financing until we collect enough DCs to pay the bill off. Am I understanding that correctly, Joelle?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sluss. So the financing for this project will be considered as part of the next capital plan, and will continue to be considered through each successive capital plan until construction begins. But it is 100% debenture or sorry, 100% DC eligible. In the event we don't have enough development charges available at the time we're required to pay the bill for the construction, we would look first to our other available DC balances for some of our other services and just briefly borrow from them to be able to fund. In the rare circumstance where we weren't able to do that, we could debenture for the money, and the future DCs collected for the library service would go to pay that debenture and no impact on the operating budget to service that.
Okay, I guess my only concern was if we start debenturing, it would be a very short-term debenture, correct? Because I believe in the short term, we will have that sufficient funding through DCs. But what I wouldn't want us to be is stuck in a 20-year amortization and making interest payments for 20 years on something that we shouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's why we would look at borrowing from some of our other DC services first, and that would likely be the alternative.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Martin, you're next. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Do we have an idea of how long it would take for the development charges to pay off the debt that's borrowed from other development charge funds?
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe the memo indicated that sufficient DCs were planned to be collected based on the growth patterns in the background study by the end of 2027. So only a couple of years.
And would that also cover interest costs for the money borrowed from other debenture reserves?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCurry, you're next.
Mayor, thank you. And thank you to the delegation for the presentation tonight. And thank you for their advocacy to Councillors Wall and Utley on this file. I found it quite revealing that we rank at the bottom with respect to population as related to the number of branches. Could someone answer how we stack up with respect to the total municipal spending on library services here per capita as related to the other communities that were cited?
Any of the staff can answer that, Joelle, or if it has to go to Rayland, then we'd need that motion where they will. So I believe, Indy, you have this to speak to, or Joelle, if you could please indicate if you're able to answer that question.
Through you, Mayor Davis, Councillor McCreary, probably best for Ray Lynn to answer that question. I don't have that information on hand, unfortunately.
I'd be happy to receive that in a memo from Ray Lynn following conclusion of the meeting, Mayor. I wonder also if there's any indication. I know there was reference made in the presentation, but I don't have anything in my possession that tells me what the anticipated operating costs will be in the operational budget for the building.
Through you, Mayor Davis, I believe the memo did speak to approximate $500,000 per year, but we could get more of a precise number when we actually know what the design and facility looks like. We'll report back at that time, because we are, as council passed resolution, report back on the LOI and the costs of phase 3.
Yeah, thank you, India. I'll remind committee that we recently turned down a request from Jay Allen to fund a curling bond spiel here because we didn't have the adequate financial and background in our possession to be able to make that decision on that night. I'm very reluctant to approve this tonight without knowing what the operating budget will be, and without knowing, in fact, if we're not already spending what would be a comparative amount of money on library services in this community at 2 locations as opposed to the multitude of locations that the board is looking for. So I would hope that we could have the answers to my 2 questions, which are the operating cost budget, as well as the overall budget comparator to the comparator communities cited. If we could have the answers to those 2 questions in writing when this comes back to us for final approval at council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor McCrory. Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. So as I understand it, then the 6.5 million will fully be funded by development charges, either now or in the future. But are those development charges collected from everywhere across the municipality, or just in the, they're not district development charges, they're collected from every development right across the city, north end, south end, everywhere? That be true?
Through Mayor Davis, yes. Development charges that are collected at the time building permit is issued is collected for all relevant services based on whether the development is residential or non-residential.
Okay, and did I hear Joelle in the report that the operating costs would be between 450 and 550, 450,000 and 550,000 a year, so an average of 500,000?
Councillor Carpenter, I do believe that's in the memo that's been provided by library staff as a number of $500,000.
And would the memo that it be about 0.3% of a tax increase be about, would that be about right?
100, yeah, a little less than that, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I would be happy to receive the same information that Councilor McCrory had asked for. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Utley, I know I've been holding you because yours will be a second speaking opportunity, but Councillor Vanderstel, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Conceivably, Joelle, if you don't mind, the costs for the operations and the build of the proposed library branch north of Brantford that has been proposed by the library board, they seem to have identical costs. And would the DCs that are being collected or will be collected throughout the city of Brantford be instrumental in the funding of that program as well?
Through the mayor, I believe that the current, I would need to look at the DC background study to see what projects are included and what we're currently collecting for by way of growth related projects for the library. Certainly this one in the Southwest is contemplated in there, but I would need to confirm if there's additional facilities that are also included in that plan.
Thank you, Joelle. If it's not too much to ask, could you please add that information to the package that's been asked for so far? I just want to make sure that different areas of the city are funded in a similar manner based on collections coming from the entire city in terms of DCs and in terms of funding for operating costs as well. Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Utley, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just like to remind council that Brantford does lag behind with our 20 odd comparative municipalities in library space per population, and that's scored on a standard scale for library. I think it's called the Wisconsin scale. We have a rapidly growing population, and it's going to grow more and more over the next 5-10 years. And building a library in the near future is when we're preparing for that growth. This is a good opportunity to reduce costs and partner with the Grand Erie School Board to partner on a joint project. I think that serves both our organizations, populations very well. And the public libraries do a lot more than provide books and reading materials. They do many other services in our community. There are places for people to come in the winter when it's cold, and be in the cool when it's really hot outside. So I hope we get behind this, move it to the next stage, and I would expect that we'll have more detailed costs to provide at that time. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, I'll just say this, that that comparative data is showing us at the sort of the bottom of that comparative list. There are a number of municipalities there, including the County of Brant. The County of Brant has a number of libraries spread throughout their region. And, you know, I don't think any community has gone wrong by making a substantial investment in libraries. And it's because, you know, as a parent and grandparent, the thing that I believe is one of the most important things to pass on to our children is a real love of reading and the ability to read. And yes, they receive that at school, but I'm sure many of you have done the same thing with your children, your grandchildren, the trips to the library, and much of the programming that's in a library is designed for children and to create in them a love of reading. And the problem we have in West Brant, of course, we've got 25,000, we'll have 25,000 people out there, a small city. And there certainly, I can see a need for a library out there. I think it'll be a great investment for that part of our community. And I would look forward to the north end of Brantford once we're developing north of Power Line Road, and we're collecting the district development charges in that area, that there will be in the course of time a library that goes somewhere in the north end to service that population. And yeah, I don't think, if you think of the Carnegie estate of the turn of the century in the 1800s, what did he decide to do with his huge wealth? Kind of like the Bill Gates of his time, was invest in libraries. And he did that because just then, as is now, yeah, probably more so now, we live in an information age. And when you go to the library and you see all the things they do well beyond just simply providing written material, and something as simple as providing access to computer and the internet for those families that have difficulty affording that, or individuals in our community that aren't able to do that. Also for seniors, many seniors have that as part of their routine, going in the morning, the afternoon into the library. So generally, it's an excellent investment, but I think the questions have been asked for the information that hopefully will come to us over the next 2 weeks before we make a final decision at council is, I'm very interested in that material that in particular Councilor McCurry's asked for. It's important to know, have an answer to those questions. But generally speaking, investing in libraries, I think over the course of the last decade and centuries, that's never been a bad investment for the community, and generally has been a good investment in the future of the community. So with that, Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the report, it was stated that there were 70,000 questions that are asked in the last year at the main branch of the library. I think maybe St. Paul was included in that as well. And the endless community programming that adds to the community is something that the Brantford board and the library staff should be extremely proud of, because what it does is it stitches the neighborhoods back together and in an atmosphere of family learning, which is sadly lost, particularly in West Brant. Fortunately, this is an opportunity now to bring the community together in a helpful and I would say wise environment. Something that West Brant has sorely been missing for the last 14 years. There's no community center out there, has not yet been built. I believe there's a community center in most of the wards in the city. We have been using a number of different possible meeting areas, public meeting areas. Unfortunately, we had to rent a lot of churches and public spaces over the last number of years. I would encourage members of council to support this simply by the fact that Ward 1 is a small city, and it has not the amenities that it's used to having, or you would be used to having if you lived in another ward in the city or closer to the downtown branch or St. Paul branch or a community center. So this is a good step in the right direction. I find the synthesis between the school board and the library exciting. I think whenever we join together joint venture projects, I think when they benefit the community, it's a very good idea. The deficit is obvious. Dr. Utley, yes, Councillor Utley has alluded to it a number of times. The truth of the matter is, Ward 1 has a deficit in this area. This would certainly help bring a very diverse and exponentially growing population together, at least give them the opportunity. And so many good things happen when families learn together. So I'm looking forward to this, a bit more information on it before I give the final yes, but I would encourage members of council to consider my comments when voting. Thank you.
So, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this, but I want to note that the distance from the tourism center to the main branch is almost identical to the distance from the tourism center to where this library is going to locate in West Brant. So, and I know it was mentioned that there's possible expansion for a library also in the north end, and we already have the property for that called the tourism center. I just want to make that point. Thank you.
All right, no more raised hands. Chris, if you would please take the vote on this item.
Through the chair, just waiting for Councillor McCreary to submit his vote.
Chris, I have nothing going on my screen.
Would you like me to manually enter your vote?
Yes, my vote will be yes.
Item 7.1, Brantford Public Library Board, Southwest Community Center, carries on a recorded vote of 9-1. Members voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
So we'll move to item 7.2. That is the resolution in respect to the John Noble Home. I believe Councillor Antosky, you're going to move the resolution. Please read it and also state your seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Carpenter. Whereas the John Noble Home is owned and operated by the County of Brant, the City of Brantford, and is home to 156 residents. And whereas there's a need to expand the number of long-term care beds locally to support the aging population across both the County of Brant and the City of Brantford. And whereas the Committee of Management submitted applications seeking approval for an additional 20 long-term care specialized behavioral beds, whereas the Committee of Management approved that staff be directed to proceed with the preparation of architectural renderings for a total of 20 beds in the renovation of Bell Court in anticipation of acceptance by the Ministry of Long-Term Care for additional long-term care bed licenses for the John Noble Home. And whereas on November 20th, 2020, the Ministry of Long-Term Care approved the addition of 20 long-term care beds at the John Noble Home for the creation of a behavioral unit. Therefore be it resolved, A, that the City of Brantford endorse the addition of the 20 long-term care beds and supports the Committee of Management and John Noble Home staff in the next steps in the process. And B, that city staff be directed to seek information from the John Noble Home staff related to the new build, specifically around capital and operating cost. And C, that the Committee of Management and John Noble Home staff be requested to provide updates on the progress of the additional beds within Bell Court. And briefly, if I may, Mayor, really this is to keep both councils informed of how things are moving forward. I think that we are very fortunate that we've had these beds approved, and there's some really progressive planning going on. Certainly, many of us are aware of the need for behavioral units in all communities, but certainly our community. And you heard some reference to kind of some thinking into the future for the possibility of a second floor. The committee is recognizing that this is going to be a growing need as we move forward. We've got certainly an aging population. And the request was really to look at how do we kind of beef up the foundation and beef up the first floor so that down the road, a second floor would be feasible, and other things like Councillor Vanderstel said, things like a shaft, an elevator shaft and things like that. So this is to keep councils informed of what is happening as they move forward. There's some really exciting plans for this part of John Noble Home, and some really innovative and passionate staff working on this. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this effort. I wish I was supporting something that was much larger. It just kind of irks me that we're going to see a lot of private business building more units in our city with provincial money when we could do the same thing and do it much better. And we don't have to make a profit. If we can break even or subsidize slightly, that's terrific. These private enterprises are there to make money. And I think we're there to look after people. And I think there's a huge philosophical difference there. So I certainly support this. Like I said, I wish it was bigger, but if this is what we're handed, I guess this is what we're handed. My only question would be, I don't know whether it's to Joelle or to Mr. Hutchings, but if we operate and own this jointly with the county, if for whatever reason the county said, no, they didn't want to participate, does that tank the whole thing, or do we move forward? How does that work?
Do we have a staff member that can answer that question, Joelle?
Yeah, I'm going to try and jump in here that the agreement does require that operational and capital expenditures be shared by both municipalities currently on the basis of population. So any of these decisions do need to go to both councils for approval. Haven't been in the situation before, but I would suspect that if one council was in agreement where the other one wasn't, that the project would become stalled. I suspect.
Well, I certainly.
But there's also a dispute resolution process to that agreement, is there not?
Right.
Yeah, there is. So, sorry, Councillor Sluss, keep going.
Yeah, no, I was just going to further comment on it, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that's the case at all. I would certainly presume that the county would be full steam ahead on this as well. But I was just concerned that if for some unknown reason this did go sideways when it got out to the county, that would be regretful and concerning. And I hope we do have a resolution that would still keep it moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councillor McCurry, you're next.
Mayor, thanks very much. I'm very glad to see that this is coming to fruition. It's been discussed for a bit, and it's good that we're getting to the finish line. And I'm pleased to hear what Councillor Sluss indicated as well, that there are other investments being made in this community with respect to the private sector, long-term care homes. Anything we can get in this community is going to do us a world of good, because we certainly can use all the spaces that we need. Through you, Mayor, are the operating costs fully covered by Province of Ontario for this specialty unit?
I think we probably would need Ms. Miller to answer that question, or one of her staff, and we can't unfortunately put the question to her unless Mr. Hutchings.
That's perfect. That's perfectly okay. I'm happy to receive it in an email. I don't necessarily have to have it answered tonight, Mayor, but I do want to know if it's 100% covered. And perhaps there may be a councillor that can answer that, who's a current board member in their speaking opportunity tonight. No, I see that we're citing the preparation of something called architectural renderings. Renderings are typically a picture of what is going to be built. I'm wondering if in this case, if renderings are indicative of construction drawings and specifications. I wonder if there's anybody that can answer to that, or if, again, if another committee member can answer that in their speaking opportunity, that'd be great. And if not, I'd like to receive that in a memo as well, Mayor. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank my councillor colleagues for the comments about the need and support for long-term care homes in the community. And I'd like to thank the province for providing us with the 20 beds. I know, as a previous councillor said, that may not be enough. I also made a suggestion to our MPP that the province funds every home, every resident for every home, private or public. They provide funding per capita. And I had suggested to Mr. Boma that since they're already paying those fees, that maybe they could make the private sector executive directors and the director of care in those private sector homes actual employees of the province. I don't believe it would cost them anything extra because they would just take that funding out of the current funding. And that would allow for some responsible reporting that without any fear of reprisal. But then also I want to say that the province has stepped forward recently and suggested they're going to put a lot more funding into services and employee ratio in long-term care homes. And I want to apprise my council colleagues that this behavioral unit actually has larger units, modern units, and it has a higher per capita ratio for staff because of the difficulty with the residents that will be in those locations. And that funding is funded by the province and increased funding. I can't quite answer Councilor McCreary's question. Is it 100% funding? I believe that we put a little bit of funding from the city and the county in all our homes and all our beds. So I think there's some there. But I think a little bit of it is still funded to the municipalities of Brant and Brantford. This is still a good news report for Brantford Brant, and that's why we as a board decided that we wanted to have the extra floor ability. It does raise the cost a little bit, but the province is okay with that at this point. That would allow us if the province is looking for further beds, we're ready to go to add more beds. The other point I'd like to make is currently there is no place for those most difficult residents that have behavioral issues, and generally they're shipped off to Hamilton. Well, they may not really be cognizant of their relatives and loved ones. Their loved ones are cognizant of who they are, and it makes it more difficult for people, Brantford and Brant County residents, to actually visit those that they love and care about. This will also free up space, other bed space in Brantford homes that are being taken up by those that probably should belong in one of those beds that are for those that more difficult resident. So it's a good thing for us. It's the first time it's been done here, and I just think we should applaud ourselves for the work. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Tusk, I have you up for a second time. We'll just first of all see if anybody else. Yeah, I'd like to speak to this as well. And just for the viewers, I mean, these are residents that have suffer from a very severe level of dementia. And when you have residents like that, it's very challenging for staff to care for them in the way in which homes have been designed in the past, and also the staffing levels, and also the staff training. And Councilor Carpenter is quite right. We've not had any of that type of facility in Brantford. So although many of them do stay here, the level of care or the type of facility they're in is not designed to meet their needs. And what's particularly exciting about this proposal is that in the province, I commend them, originally it was 10 units. And what's really interesting is taking this vacant wing that's just sitting dormant, changing the design so that it considers the needs of those patients and makes their life easier, because it tries to understand what it is that those who have severe dementia need to make their life more stable and routine and predictable. And also the staff, there's a higher level of staffing there, and they have the requisite training to do this. It was very exciting when the board asked, well, driven by the staff, and we approved it, for the province to approve this. And what also happened is that the design of the building has changed, and it probably even now with the current design better meets the needs of those residents. So, kudos to all involved, the staff, the province, and also the members who, both county and city, who sit on the John Noble Home Board of Governors. And it is exciting, and I agree we probably need more, especially since the private industry can't meet the needs of these patients, so the residents. So probably, unfortunately, more space will be required as the city grows and we continue to have residents that have this level of dementia. So, Councilor Tusk.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to state that this has already been presented to the county. It was presented on October 26th. And I'd like to make the motion to waive the rules. We've asked, Jennifer to hang in and be ready for some questions. And I think she probably got the answers to the questions that have been made here. And rather than sending them away to write a report to get back to us. So looking for a seconder for that, please.
So that's second by Councillor Carpenter, and that's a motion to waive the rules so that we can ask questions of the staff that are present still from the John Noble Home. So it's on the floor. Deputy Clerk, do you need anything else to? I assume there's no discussion on it.
Mayor, if I may.
Oh, yes, Councillor McCurry.
Typically, a motion cannot be entertained if another motion is on the floor. This is not an amendment or a referral or a deferral. It's introducing a new motion while one is in play.
I don't agree with you. I think it's in reference to this particular item. It's to provide a better, more informed response. I think it's appropriate. That's my rule. I appreciate your position, but I don't agree. I think it's in order to allow this motion to proceed. So with that, let's take the vote on that.
The motion to waive the rules carries with the required 2/3 vote of 8-2. Members voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, Carpenter, and Tilborg, and Toski, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillors McCreary and Wall.
Okay, Councillor Antosky, carry on. I think you want to ask Ms. Miller a question, or ask her if she can answer the questions that have already been asked. Sorry, you're muted, Councillor Antosky.
My apologies. Thank you. Jennifer, I'm not sure if you wrote down the questions that were being asked. I had just asked the one about the county's response being received. And I know that Councillor McCreary had a couple. One was the operational costs and how much being funded by the province. And I'm sorry, I did not write all the questions down. So those are.
There you are. Ms. Miller, can you answer those questions, please?
Yes, so through the chair, in regards to the architectural renderings, they do go to the ministry for approval, and then they would come back to council. And then I'll get Shelley to answer the funding question.
Through the mayor. So the question around operational funding, at the time that we originally put the project together, we were looking at an approximate $100,000 additional in operations. But as people are probably aware, we've had some additional funding announcements since then. And we are also applying for funding for special behavior. So at this point in time, it's not intended to substantially increase the operational budget for the home.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Antosky?
Just if you might report on the county's response to this from October 26th, please.
So through the chair, the county were very favorable to the plans and did support our presentation.
Great. Okay, Councillor Antosky, I think you've hit your 4 minutes. So is there anybody else that wants to speak to this? If not seeing anybody, if Mr. Deputy Clerk, if you please take the vote.
Item 7.2, endorsement of additional long-term care beds at John Noble Home, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, and Toski, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, we're going to move to 6.2.2, which is the Community Physician Recruitment Program and Action Plan, and the resolution that's on the floor. That there's that kind of omnibus motion putting all those Section 6 items on, and that's just to be received. So we are doing it separately because we did, of course, have a delegation. So any discussion? Not seeing any discussion, so I'll, Mr. Deputy Clerk, if you would please take the vote on that item.
Item 6.2.2, Community Physician Recruitment 2021 Program and 2022 Action Plan carries unanimously on recorded votes. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, Van der Stel, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll move then into the other items in section 6 that have been separated, and that would be beginning with 6.1.1, which is the advanced metering infrastructure in respect to the replacement of water meters. So that's up for discussion. Councillor Utley, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank staff for their report and for the benefits that this initiative, if it's passed, will be for consumers and businesses. And I really like the early detection of leaks. We've all experienced the 1 or 2 people coming before us with bills running into thousands of dollars for a leaky toilet or a leaky tap. And we know that devastating and the shock that has when you open up an envelope with that bill in it. But I do have a question, if it's possible, of staff, and that is, if there's a glitch in the system, let's say the system goes down, as everything does with technology from time to time, how will that affect consumers and the recording of water flowing through, through the meters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass it on to Joel, our consultant, to respond. He knows about the technology better than me.
Great. Currently, the manual reading process, if you miss a read, you have to estimate. The technology being considered has 720 reads per month, and there's significant redundancy in both the network as well as within the radio itself. There's typically anywhere from 35 to 90 days. So if a tower went down, then there is a significant amount of data to go back and bill properly.
Would that be done? Would the fix be done manually or?
No, typically what happens is that if the network goes down, it's typically a power outage or something like that. Once it is back up, so typically you have a 24 to 72 hour period to get that data collector back up. Once it's back up, it will go back and collect the redundancy or the additional readings from the radio transmitter itself.
Okay,
so it avoids a manual process.
Thanks, Joel.
Councillor Sless, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the presentation, I thought I heard that implementing this process will reduce the number of estimated bills. Why would we still be estimating bills?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. We will not be estimating the bills, Councillor Sless, unless it's really necessary. That is, we don't want to say 0 estimated bills unless we know for sure there's no problem at all. But I would think that with the number of readings we get, we should not have the need to estimate the bills.
Okay, well, I feel better about that because in the presentation it was indicated that it will reduce the number of them. I guess it'll reduce it to 0. So, okay, I'll accept that. The other question I had was, I believe there was an 18-year payback on this project. What's the life cycle?
The 20 years is the life cycle of the new meters. But anyway, I'll hand it to Joel to add more information.
The system is supported by a 20-year warranty. First 10 years is full replacement. Next 10 years is prorated. The average age of the system is about 20 years.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Van Tilburg, you're next.
Yeah, I think each term of council I've had, in each 4-year term, we've ended up with a whopper in the ward where you're looking at a $3,000 to $5,000 bill. And I remember last term speaking with Selby, how can we get on top of this? And timing is the key, early detection, because people that are used to a $30 bill are very much not used to a $1,300 bill. And it's not apparent to people just how much water a running toilet can consume. And it happens, and that is very disruptive to people's lives. Most people haven't budgeted any way to cover that. And often there is no recourse, and the recourse has been pleading mercy before us councillors to please reduce the bill any way you can, and they'll try and be on top of it. And so while this looks like a lot of money, it is paid. Selby, this is all paid internally through the rates. Is that how it happens?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And the rates don't go up specifically because we're buying these units, correct?
That's correct, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And so these things will help with that early detection. Would you be able to provide with me a contact in one of the communities that has this system already in place so that I could just get some feedback before we have our final vote at the end of the month? Is that possible to send that possibly to me and the other councillors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can do that.
All right. And what is the average price of
Sorry,
these meters?
Councillor, if I ask a question, you're looking for staff name or councillor's name from that community?
Actually, a little bit of both, quite frankly. A councillor that has experience in it, if they've ever ran into any problems, or there's certainly feedback from the community, but also from staff. And so that in case I have some more questions, like how do these work? How's failure doing? Have people noticed like a rate change? Those kind of just the basic questions that citizens might be worried about. See, I'm not worried because I see the other end. I see these horrific bills that come up when there's a water loss or a running tap or just anything, and it's actually quite frightening. So my whole thing over the last number of years is to find a solution for early detection, and we've made changes along the way. But this looks like we can get. I would like to know what the quickest detection level would be for a reporting mechanism. That's probably why I want to contact the other communities. What is the price of these meters individually?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the meter, and there is also a radio transmitter device and the network and the software, many things go with that. I'll pass it to Joe to give the price of the meters and the transmitters that go with this.
Sounds off.
Right, I'm on mute. On average, the price of the meter and the radio transmitter is about $200. The other $150 is related to the installation services and support required.
Thank you. That's exactly the math that I got. It's around 350, 340 bucks. So with that, we've estimated there's 35,000 households now, and this is going to try to be implemented over a 3-year period. Are we taking into consideration the growth in the number of households in this budget that is being presented?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Mantelberg. We've taken into account the growth and also the tool area that we'll be bringing on board later on. So we've taken those into account in the overall program.
Thank you very much.
Great, Councillor Martin, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Joel. And at the end of 20 years, when the system is run its course, is there a cheaper option to extend it for another 20 years, or is it a full equivalent of $12 million of today's dollars in 20 years to bring this system back online?
Realistically, the changes in technology the additional functionality that is likely gained in 20 years, it would be a full replacement in 20 years. There might be some economies, some cost reduction over that 20 years, but yeah, you're looking at a 20-year replacement cycle for this type of system.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate in the report that it says it's an 18-year payback. It's nice that we can do something that's going to greatly enhance our service by allowing people to get notification of leaks in their systems, and hopefully eliminate a lot of the high water bill situations that we've seen, as Councillor Van Tilburg talked about, and the fact that it's at no cost to the taxpayer, that this is paid for by savings through this system, I think is fantastic, and I look forward to this system being implemented so that I'll no longer have the high water bills from my income properties. Thank you.
Councillor McCrory.
Mayor, thank you. Let me apologize for the lousy quality of my video. I'm here in the Charlie Ward room, and the lights only stay on for so long before I have to get up and walk around to make them come back on by waving my arms, getting the photo sensors to turn them on for me. I do have a number of questions. When I look at item 9.1.2, the report says that we're not able to utilize BPI's existing AMI network due to the merger and other limitations. I wonder if we could say very briefly what the other limitations are.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, generally what they said was if we use the BPI system, we have to single source to that vendor. So that there is a limitation. And we know that BPI system is connected to the provincial system. So so that's why BPI mentioned that there are some limitations, but that doesn't prohibit, sorry, Joel, you want to add something?
No, that's sufficient. Thank you. Currently, what percentage of meters do we replace every year with our current system?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a 15-year meter replacement program. So that's what we do, roughly 2,300 or so meters every year.
Okay. So the 16,578 meters that are being replaced, they're all 15 years old.
That's the reason for the replacement, yes.
Okay. Now, can you explain how the AMI transmitter works in language that I will understand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass it to Joel. He'll do a better job.
Yeah, no problem. The radio transmitter sits on the outside of the property. It's a small box. It will send a signal to the water meter register and pull a reading off of that water meter. And then it will transmit through radio frequency a collection of readings to a data collector.
How's that powered, Joel?
So it's a battery powered device. So that battery, it's a lithium ion battery, and that battery has a 20-year life.
Huh. You'll have to give me the name of the supplier because the ones on my stationary bike only last about 6 months. So do I need to worry about wearing a tinfoil hat to protect me from the radio frequencies?
Sure. So no, these products are approved by Industry Canada. There is a safety code 6 is what it's called. The products typically installed are less than 1 or 2% of the upper limit that's allowable. So a cell phone, a baby monitor, all usually exceed.
Super, thank you. Now we refer to the first phase as the pilot phase. Is it a pilot phase in that if we don't like it, we're not going to proceed with the installs?
We actually call it a proof of concept, but it's basically vetting that the contractor is able to ramp up to full deployment. If their business processes or technologies don't work, we would then have an out clause, and the city would be able to reconsider.
So it's a pilot project really for that provider.
Yeah, with the intention that it would
Okay.
move to full installation.
Yeah, okay. Now, I found some curious wording. It says in 9.2 that we're going to select the ideal supplier. I wonder if you could define what an ideal supplier is. Is that a lowest compliant bidder?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we mean from that is we have a customer portal requirements. There are requirements in the vendor has to install the device, have the enough staff to deploy within the time. So there are requirements of this contract because we'll be touching every property in the city. So customer service and less minimum disruption are those requirements. So we want to make sure the vendor we select meet all those requirements.
So is it
Councillor
then the
McCreary,
lowest compliant
Councillor
bidder, or is
Councillor
it?
McCreary, you've gone beyond the 4 minutes. You want me to put you down for a second time?
I'll put my hand up if I do, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Vanderstel, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Joel. As I understand it, based on the data that comes in so frequently, you'll be able to generate reports that would be of use to industries in Brantford who have various amounts of water use, and better help them understand that they have peak and low periods, and that fluctuates over the week, month, year. I can only assume that there will be a communications mechanism between the data that's collected and the companies who are interested in what their consumption rates are. Would that go through somebody like Rochelle Rumney, who's trying to find those efficiencies, or would it be going through other members of staff? How would that function?
Sure. So there's a couple ways to communicate. The data, the customer portal would provide the ability for that customer to download tabular data, consumption data, and incorporate that into their production. There's also some for those customers that need better data, real-time data. There's also the ability to connect in directly to some of their production systems.
Okay, Joe. Well, then that leads to my next question. So, if people wanted to key into that Wi-Fi signal, and they have the software on their iPad or their phone or whatever, would they be able to monitor in very much the same way that industry would?
So they don't do it through a Wi-Fi. Any customers would be getting access to the data through the secured customer portal. So you can't, just because it's an RF signal, many of the systems that are out there are actually encrypted. So you can't just listen to, and obtain it through the RF. You would need to go through a secured customer portal.
Okay, well, that brings some clarity to it. And it's good to hear that companies will have that option. How are we letting companies know that is an option for their own tabular data?
So we will develop public outreach materials, and there's often the residential focuses on appointments, but some of the commercial also, we provide more information to the commercial customers that allow them to better understand where to get that consumption data.
For the next 20 years?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thanks very much. Again, through you to staff or to the consultant. So math would seem to indicate that we save $800,000 a year from our regular budget of replacement of meters at to the tune of 2,300 at 350. Has that already been netted out of the 12 mil, or is that a budget adjustment going forward in your annual budgets?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, any savings that we're showing in the report, it'll be through the annual budget process. You'll see in the operating budget changes.
Okay. So it indicates a 262,000 saving, but really it looks more like 800,000 that you'll save on the annual replacements at the end of the 2 years. So is that going to be zeroed out at some point, Sylvie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor McCreary, you're looking at the 12 million, and I'm kind of trying to understand the 800,000 savings. How
Yeah, if you're not replacing the annual 2,300 meters, that's about $800,000 a year. So after 2 years, you've replaced all those meters. So does that $800,000 come out of your operating then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the $350 that Joel mentioned includes the RF transmitter and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to replace RF transmitters. Typically, when we replace, we're replacing the meter only.
Right.
So our program cost is around 560,000 is our current annual budget now.
Yep. Okay.
So we will be removing any meter replacement costs from that, and then we'll be adding the new software costs, license costs.
Thank you, Sylvie. Now, my last question relates to item 9.2. It says to ensure customer compliance with the project, revisions to the water service connection bylaw 159/2016 will be required to assist the city in gaining access customer premises for the purpose of replacement, et cetera. That's a bylaw that's coming to us in 2022. Can you explain, Sylvie, what the difference is between that and what we're doing now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, we do have the water connections bylaw that talks about giving access to the city to replace the water meter, but it doesn't talk about radio transmitter. It doesn't talk about other devices that would be part of this meter package we are talking about. So it will be a minor revision just to make sure that all the meter components in the new technology are included in that bylaw. We have the current bylaw that gives us access to enter the property for meter changeouts.
So it'll be minor as far as we are concerned, but as far as the customer is concerned, will it be minor as well?
I would think so, because they already give us access. All this is the meter components that right now in the bylaw does not list the radio transmitter. So we want to make sure the bylaw covers all the things.
It's housekeeping. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Okay, and look at that timing. My lights have gone out again. Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other speakers. Deputy Clerk, will you please take the vote on this?
Item 6.1.1, Advanced Metering Infrastructure and Water Meter Replacement Project Update carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll move on to item 6.1.2, which is the launch of the climate environmental implications. We had a presentation, so it's being separated for that purpose. So we're up for discussion. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Rochelle. And sorry, Rochelle, I'm kind of catching you off guard on this, but I know that for most municipalities, climate change officers or sustainability officers offices are relatively new. And so many of you talk together trying to share, what different communities are doing. Are you able to say, or do you know of any other municipalities? Because I know what you've done and shown us tonight, municipalities are kind of struggling with. How do we put a plan together where we can measure and where staff can be integrated and easily do this and not cause lots of extra work? Have you found that this is kind of, new and that many municipalities are not doing this yet?
Through the chair, yes, there is starting to become a little bit more widely used, although certainly it appears more on the qualitative assessment side of things. So some municipalities are putting in place sort of these sections to talk about environmental impacts without sort of trying to quantify it yet. So I know that that's been a little bit more complex. So we're gonna try it out and learn how we can use this.
Well, thanks, Rochelle. I want to thank you for doing this, and it's a huge project. I know, talking with many of my colleagues at FCM and many different municipalities, this is something that they grapple with. And when I mentioned, this is being worked on in our city, lots of, oh, can you share it? Can you tell us how to do this? Can you, so I think that there will be people asking about this. I'm excited about the pilot of this, and I've talked to some staff members that are excited to do this, and we hear all the time here, what you measure you can manage. And so I'm really excited to see the rollout, and thank you for all of your hard work and the various different liaisons from different staff departments that you've been working with. Thank you.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Rochelle, thank you for your report. I found, when I read it, I suddenly got the impression that you are collecting data right now. Good. So I wasn't wrong in interpreting that. I think that's, reading through or seeing the numbers that came from the Gretzky Center. That, it really makes me even more concerned about what we're doing as a city and what we're not doing to try and reduce those emissions. So, I think that we've got a long way to go as a city to do our part, and I'm sure businesses are doing the same. But I just found that a very interesting interesting and concerning, to be honest. You did mention in there about the loss of 10 trees somewhere with.
Yeah, so through the chair. So that was just an example that we've put in there just to sort of show how the tool works. So it is referring to a project that's under development, but that piece of information is just an example. That's not correct.
Well, I don't want you to lose sleep over that. Just want to say that our tree man, Chuck Beach, is in the process of planting a lot more trees yet in our city. So thank you, Chuck, if you're looking in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sluss, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rochelle, as you know, I've got a constituent that keeps pressing for a cost-benefit analysis done on this climate crisis. You're shaking your head. I keep continually getting the emails asking me. In your contact and conversations with counterparts in other cities, is anybody else trying to answer that question?
Through the chair, I haven't heard about that specific request anywhere else, but certainly it may be being asked elsewhere, but not that I know of.
Okay, if I can impose on you to ask that question as you talk to colleagues, just to see if somebody else is working on something like that, because I would imagine it would be a gigantic project to try and do that. But the constituent seems consistent, and that's his right. And I would hope that somehow at some point we'll be able to answer that question for him. Okay, so thanks, Rochelle.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. In the calculator, it talks about removing trees and planting trees. Does it factor in that a 30-year-old tree is going to capture more carbon than a 2-year-old tree? And does it allow for the aging of the trees to be capturing more carbon as they grow?
Through the chair, we've given it an annual value just because it's too complicated to look at the age of the tree that's being planted. So that sort of is an average. If we're looking at a 50-year tree, we've taken the average carbon offset annually. But you're correct. Yeah, as it ages, it absorbs more carbon. So we just had to make some assumptions in that regard.
So the trees are taken as an average over their lifetime.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Yep, I'd like to make a few comments. And first of all, thanking Councillor Antosky. This is comes out of that climate change initiative that's brought this forward. So, but it is, I agree with Councillor Utley. It's we knew when we were debating the climate change that in terms of our own operations, certainly electrifying the fleet, I'm talking about buses, or transit fleets, and maintenance fleets. That gets you part of the way there to net zero. But for us and for other Canadians, it's buildings and the amount of energy that buildings use. And I think having these numbers will really bring that home to people. Like that number in the Wayne Gretzky Center, it really opens your eye to that and how we need to really focus not only on making buildings energy efficient, which means insulating them really well, but also how you actually heat them. And how, as we deal with this issue moving forward the next several decades, we're going to have to find different ways of heating buildings than through natural gas. The other question I have for you, this is a question I have for you, Rochelle. So this climate change lens that we're bringing to our decision making to help us in our decision making, that applies to city projects. What about planning applications? Do you see the day, or is this something that could be used to assist us in determining whether or not a rezoning should proceed, or is it? Do we see the day that that'll be incorporated into site planning or planning applications?
Through you, we talked about that in the development of the tool, and there is a section in there that looks at land use change. So we know that some of those decisions, like at that first stage in making those land use changes, is a big factor in sort of the emissions on that property. But we don't know really how to quantify that yet, and it's very specific to each municipality and lots of different factors. So right now we are collecting data on just the hectares of land that's being changed from one land use designation to another, but we don't have a way to sort of quantify the difference in emissions that's likely to come out of that.
And does the Planning Act allow us to do that, or do we know that, or is?
Through you, I'm not sure. I'd have to, talk to the planning department and we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's a question, Rochelle, I'd appreciate if you'd raise with our planning staff. I'd personally like to know, maybe other councillors, what the answer to that question is. And thanks very much, Rochelle. It's a very interesting report. So any other questions before I call the vote? Or comments, discussion? Seeing none. Deputy Clerk, stick the vote on that, please.
Through the chair, just waiting for Councillor McCreary's vote.
Chris, I don't have connectivity on my iPad. I'll be voting in the affirmative on this.
Item 6.1.2, launch of climate and environmental implications section for staff reports carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Van der Stelt, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll move to the next separated item, which is 6.1.3, the standardization of equipment, parts, supplies, and services. Councillor Utley, you asked for this to be separated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a comment, a question for staff. I was very pleased to see this initiative before us tonight. It's long overdue, and I'm very pleased to be able to support this initiative. But most of all, this is a significant continuous improvement project. You know, you're improving the process here, and this is going to save, I'm sure, space and cost in standardization. So just wanted to congratulate staff on this, and hope we get it in place soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Utley.
Councillor Van der Stelt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. If I read it correctly, there are 3 companies with which we're kind of signing up for the next 5 years for products to be delivered to us on a regular basis, that the ones that we're using most frequently. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vanderstelt. Yes, Net Optics and Visitor Sales and Xylem. So those are the three vendors that we use for under standardization.
Okay, so Net Optics is in Brantford, right? Visitor Sales is in Aurora, and Xylem has about 3 locations as distributors. But what happens in the case of COVID shortages, or any shortages for that matter? If we sign up for 5 years and we can't get the product from these suppliers as distributors, and because they can't get it, do we have an option, or are we basically signing a contract with these suppliers? Do we have an option to go beyond them and get the whatever replacement parts are required for our repairs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're not assigning a contract. All it is we have, for example, Net Optics installs our fiber connections to all our pumping stations. So if we have built a new pumping station and if we have to install a fiber optic connection, we would go to Net Optics for installation, but we don't have an existing contract with them. So it's when the service is needed, and if they are not able to provide the service, we can go to a different vendor if that is possible at the time.
Okay, good news. Thank you very much, Selby. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, seeing no further discussion on this item, Mr. Deputy Clerk, please take the vote.
Item 6.1.3, standardization of equipment, parts, supplies, and services, carries unanimously on recorded vote of 10-0. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, and Mayor Davis.
So move on to the next item, which is item 6.1.5, the Healthy Aging Strategy Action Plan. And Councillor Vanderstelt, you asked for this to be separated.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I believe, to Marlene. I don't know if she's in the room. I don't see her in the first room. I'll pop over to the second room. Is Marlene here or not? There she is. Sorry about that. Okay, so Marlene, as I understand it, so the Grand River Council on Aging organization we all trust, know, and love, put together a wish list scenario. So 700 people responded to this questionnaire. Or can you tell me a little bit more about the nature of the questionnaire in about the space of a minute? Because I have a few other questions.
So through the chair, Aaron's on as well, and I'm going to ask Aaron just to speak, and hopefully we won't take up your time.
You're muted, Aaron. So now I've lost 5 seconds.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I apologize, Councillor. Through you, Mayor Aaron Wallace, Director of Community Programs. So what we're referring to in the report there is the age-friendly summits that were done in collaboration with MPP Levac and the Council on Aging a few years ago. So the nature of those questions were really to look at the 8 domains of an age-friendly community set out by the World Health Organization. I'll give you a couple of examples for brevity. So transportation, social participation, and then the workshops, which at that time were in person, really talk to older adults and service providers about within that domain, what would you like to see happen? So I hope that I tried to keep that brief. Certainly I can give you more details on that.
Yeah, quick follow-up. So the top 3, outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, and housing. I got that right?
Through the mayor, there were a number of recommendations through all of the domains, but those certainly were the ones that came through loud and clear, yes.
Okay, so they were on the top. Okay. All right, thank you, Aaron. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Marlene, what percent do you figure of the people who are waiting on our lists, our multiple lists for affordable housing, what percentage of those people kind of fall into the category of an aging population? Do we have data on that?
So through the chair, we do have data on that, and we do supply that through our quarterly reports. I don't have the data currently with me, but I'd happy to circulate that number to you.
Yeah, please, if you don't mind, I'm keenly interested in the fact that there may, be a percentage of people who are waiting for housing and outdoor spaces. And out of a crowd of 700 people, it's surprising and interesting to me that those are among the top three. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the World Health Organization, the top one, I don't know if they're rated in order of what's most important, but outdoor spaces, buildings, transportation, housing, social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communications and information and community support, and health services. Certainly health services rings true. I just want to thank staff that were involved in this program, and I just want to talk about some of the things that was going on. And I appreciate your involvement about the Grand River Council on Aging, and as well as your involvement in the Elder Abuse Awareness Committee, which of course I sit on, and we have a lot of good volunteers working hard there. So we have the annual Seniors Toolkit, which is a practical handbook. We've got the annual Healthy Aging Passport. We've got the annual Let's Get Moving campaign, the annual workshop on a bus training workshop, the Brantford Transit education video, annual Elder Abuse Awareness and Prevention workshop series that we have in partnership with, of course, the Elder Awareness Committee. Power of Attorney workshops that we've talked about in this council before, Healthy Living workshop series, and it goes on and on from there. But I just want to say how we don't talk about this enough, but what a great job we are doing in this area of preventing and working with our seniors in our community and making it a more livable community for our seniors. I just really appreciate all the work that staff are doing in this council and their support for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Councillor Carpenter, that I think our city staff, and also working with various groups, including the Grand Council on Aging, have done a terrific job over the last 3 years, building the connections with the seniors in our community, developing the programs, some of which have come about as a result of important input from councillors such as yourself, and continuing, as we can see from the plan, to implement, not just to stand pat, but to continue to implement new and other additions to programming to address what is a growing segment of our community, as I can personally attest to, and keeping that sector of that part of our population as engaged as possible and as healthy as possible. And I agree with you. I think I really do look forward to seeing that this work do continue, and that then it's also important that we recognize the many ways that I think seniors contribute to our city and our economic and social structure of the city. So with that, do I see any other speakers? No. So clerk, deputy clerk, if we could have the vote on this one.
Through the chair, just waiting for Councillor Wall to vote.
You should have received it. Okay.
Item 6.1.5, Healthy Aging Strategy 2022-2024 Action Plan carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, and Toski, Martin, Sless, Van der Stelt, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so we have 2 items left. We have item 6.1.6, the recording of closed sessions. Councillor Carpenter has to be separated. And then after that, we have Councillor Toski's resolution regarding the parking spot at the Walter Gretzky parking spot. So staff beside and behind me have been working pretty steadily over the last 3 hours. So I'm going to call a 5-minute recess for them and for me. We can take a little break before we move on to finish our meeting, which I think hopefully we can do before 10 o'clock. So that's the 5-minute break. So we'll reconvene. So again, we have 2 items left. We have item 6.1.6. That's the recording closed session meetings. Councillor Carpenter, you've asked that to be separate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank staff for this lengthy report. It's a very balanced report. I really appreciate it. And they also provided us with a possible amendment. I'd like to move that amendment that staff have provided. And I'd like to add at the end of that amendment, and that this be referred to estimates as part of that amendment. And I think seeking a second, I believe my seconder is my ward mate, Councilor Cheryl Antosky.
Okay,
And
so we can just get the amendment up just so we know what it is.
Thank you.
So can you share it for us? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not going to debate it. We've already had debate when I initially presented this, so I'm going to save that for another time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have the amendment. So to the amendment, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis, and thank you to Councillor Carpenter for moving the amendment. I'm going to read a direct quote from the report. The Ontario Ombudsman, in their Open Meeting Guides for Municipalities, 4th edition, notes, the Ombudsman recommends that all municipalities also make audio or video recordings of all meetings, open and closed, to ensure the most thorough record possible. After meeting behind closed doors, they should report in the open session on what transpired in the closed session, providing as much detail as the subject matter permits. The Ontario Ombudsman in the Annual Report 2019-2020 notes as well, more municipalities than ever now make audio or video recordings of all meetings, open and closed. As the Ombudsman recommends, we now know of 25. And I'll spare you reading all 25 cities. Record it all, everything we do, please, and keep a record of it for as long as society shall insist. I don't like the idea of anyone, anywhere, thinking that anything that their elected officials is doing is not on record. It bothers me, and I will do anything I can to move this forward. Everything we do as elected officials for this community should be on record. We just had a Freedom of Information Request Act, 2 of them, in fact, and I happily hand over my devices so that people can read what I have done as an elected official, because I have nothing to hide, and I don't think that politicians should hide anything. So please, I quote, record it all. And if people want to question what we're doing, let them read it. Or hear it, or watch it, or listen to it.
Okay. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could staff put that up on the screen again? That amendment was, I didn't have time to read it thoroughly. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Councillor Utley, any comment? So you're.
I just wanted to read it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, one of our legal staff, just a question. What would be the statute of limitations on actions taken by people against former members of council based on their interaction in an in-camera meeting?
Typically, the statute of limitations is 2 years, but there are some exceptions to that depending on the factual circumstances.
Okay, and that is 2 years past the expiration of the member of council's term of office, or 2 years past the meeting date?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be 2 years from the date of the facts giving rise to the potential action. So it could be beyond the term of the council member.
And what, for argument's sake, let's assume that there are a number of members of council who participate in in-camera meetings. A number of those members may not be returning. What protects those members of council from comments that they made while they were serving in a public capacity? Are they left to their own devices to protect them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just generally speaking, there is something called the defense of qualified privilege that arises in certain circumstances with respect to defamation claims. The facts would have to be identified specifically to determine whether it would apply to the actions. There are some limitations to that defense, but that is one defense that would be available. In addition, the city does have an indemnification policy that could apply as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, when I went through the list, it appeared most communities that do record their in-camera sessions do audio, not video, but audio. Is I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, is that simply a cost thing, or why would they opt for one as opposed to doing both, or doing, like, I don't understand why they all seem to be doing audio, not video.
Through the chair to Councillor Sluss, that's a great question. It could be a factor of pre-COVID when meetings aren't virtual. I can say that when we spoke with our closed meeting investigator, he has been part of investigations where there are audio recordings and video recordings. And he had suggested to us that if council were to implement audio recordings of closed session meetings, that we do the audio and video component, just because when he was conducting investigations with municipalities that only had audio, they would often have a hard time hearing who was speaking, especially if they weren't speaking very clearly. There would be difficulties hearing people if more than one person was speaking. And also you couldn't really get a good picture of the meeting without the body language or the words spoken associated with that body language. So our closed meeting investigator did recommend to us that if we were to implement this practice, that we would do audio and video.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff. The report mentions training for advisory boards, task force, and committees. So does that mean that all their meetings will be recorded, open and in camera?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. As it stands right now, our task forces rarely meet in camera, but there are other circumstances where we do have in-camera meetings, and our procedural bylaw defines in-camera meetings as meetings of council, and that would apply to our advisory committees, our task forces. Although it's not routine that they do move to go in camera, there is the possibility that they will move in camera, and this policy would apply to them as well. And so that's why we're suggesting providing training to those bodies as well.
Okay, are there open meetings recorded now?
Virtually, yes.
Okay, before we went virtual, they weren't being recorded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So once we go back to meeting in person, this will be a huge cost increase, will it not?
Through the chair, starting November 23rd or 24th, I'm not sorry for the date, we're going to start hybrid meetings. From there, our meetings will be a hybrid approach of in-person and through video. Once that gets implemented at the council, committee of the whole, and standing committee level, there's going to be a staff report to council with regards to direction for how our advisory committees and our task forces are rolled out for hybrid meetings. So it is possible that those meetings will also be hybrid considering what council's direction is.
But eventually we will go back to in-person meetings without Zoom and without recording and virtual.
That would be a decision of council.
Okay. And will there be a need for extra staff to administer all these recordings and encrypt them and save them? And
yep. So there are additional steps that would be required, as you mentioned, purchasing hardware that could be encrypted, purchasing the software for encryption services, storing the actual records. There are some implications associated with the FOI process. Right now, if somebody were to request, closed session meeting minutes, typically would take 2 minutes per page to kind of see if MFIPA would apply to the records. However, when you have a recording or a video, our FOI coordinator would have to potentially sit through a 2 to 3 hour in-camera meeting to determine whether or not to release certain parts of it. And then on top of that, our FOI coordinator would have to be trained on video editing software or IT in terms of redacting or releasing certain information. So the FOI process would incur most of the labor.
And if somebody does an FOI request, those costs pass through the person making the request, or is that a cost of the taxpayer?
That'd be a cost through the person making the request.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I'm going to be very happy to support this. It's actually going to put the in camera into the words in camera, as the public is, and myself, when before I was a counselor, I always thought going in camera meant you were being recorded. I didn't realize it just meant, no, you're just going behind closed doors. And there was no electronic record. So I think this is a good point. I mean, this term has been rather unusual. I've never seen so many FOIs before. So my questions would be, because I'm sure the public are interested in this, we get recorded in these meetings that are closed door. Who is it that actually gets to look at the footage and determine who sees what? Who picks this? Who does that job? Just so it's out there and we know.
Through the chair, council deems our FOI coordinator as the head under MFIPA, and so our FOI coordinator would make that determination based on the analysis of MFIPA.
And could that information get out to the general public, or is that for courts, or is that for what we have this record? We do these things behind camera because we're obviously there's often critical information that shouldn't be released for various different reasons as listed for going in camera. So I guess the whole thing is, how is it determined what could be? Just if you could just throw some examples out there on what possible things could having a recording of our meetings in camera be used for, just in general, other than just for our good records, because I will never see these recordings.
Through the chair, so the recordings would only be accessed if there's an investigation by the closed meeting investigator or by the integrity commissioner. With regards to what would get released to the public, the FOI coordinator will look at the recording or the video and determine what parts of the discussion fall under those exemptions under the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. From there, that is what the determination will be in terms of what to release and not to release. So general discussions that could be said in open session will be released within the FOI.
And prior to that, the only records we had were the minutes that were taken. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And minutes are taken of every in-camera closed meeting we have, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. And in addition to my earlier response with regards to the release of the in-camera videos, if we do have an appeal from the IPC, so in the instance that a member of the public appeals the decisions of our FOI coordinator in terms of the redactions to the record, our whole video would be released to the IPC for them to be able to determine whether or not we properly redacted certain information in the audio video recording.
Thank you, Chris. I didn't know if Heidi had something of value that she wished to present. That would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Vintelberg, and through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. To your question, Councillor Vintelberg, there's one additional area. It's noted in the report outside of the FOI process. So I understand your question related to the Freedom of Information request made under MFIPA. But the other possible use for this video would be in a court process where the courts have a very different standard when it comes to disclosure of information. So any documents or information that's arguably relevant to the key matters before the court has to be disclosed in that process. And that is a different standard than through FOI. And what you may find is that these videos then become part of a court record or as evidence, whether that's as part of a discovery process or otherwise, through not only the courts, but other tribunals like the Human Rights Tribunal, for instance. And we could anticipate that we would get those requests for disclosure, particularly where you have zero cost litigation, like at the Human Rights Tribunal, where there really is no cost for making that request. And even if the record was essentially not disclosed because, for instance, it was covered by privilege rather than simply just one of the items enumerated in the Municipal Act 2001, then you may find that you are spending a lot of time and money on motions arguing about the non-disclosure of that information. So if you had a handbook for municipal lawyers, they may say something different than what the Ombudsman said, because the Ombudsman, as we've noted before, is concerned with the closed meeting portion, whereas your municipal councillors are concerned with disclosure through other processes such as litigation, arbitration, and at the tribunal level.
Thank you very much. That was perfect.
Councilor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. We deal with personnel matters in camera. We deal with appointments of municipal volunteers in camera. Could we be subject to inquiries about failed candidates and failed appointees? Is that something that we could expect to see coming at us?
Through the chair, if they submit a closed meeting complaint, yes.
Chris, what about second bidders, where council has met in camera to discuss a contract or award of contract?
So again, through the chair, if anybody makes a closed meeting complaint, then the closed meeting investigator will form a formal investigation, will launch a formal investigation.
Okay, so if it's a human rights complaint made by a failed candidate for office as an appointee or for employment, I would have to think that everything said would be on the table, would it not?
So through the chair, I think, Councillor, you're getting at what we were referring to before, and I see Jeff Daly here, our legal counsel, but certainly one of the concerns that's set out in the report is from the litigation side of things, whether you're in arbitration or dealing with labor unions, or especially at the Human Rights Tribunal, that outside of the FOI process and outside of a closed meeting investigation, you could have requests for disclosure and litigation that would be difficult to argue. And I know Mr. Daly can speak to one current case where at least a portion of a recorded in-camera session was ordered to be released.
Yeah, you know, I appreciate why this is before us today, but aside from, you know, aside from looking good for the media and talking about democracy and transparency, we are officers of this corporation, and we have to be acting on behalf of this corporation. And, you know, I think that trumps the sort of dialogue that happens in the media and on social media. And, you know, I mean, this will certainly be a topic for discussion in those venues. But I think we have to act as responsible parties here. We've got an amendment before us tonight, which I think deserves considerable discussion, more than we're going to have tonight and in a council session. I think perhaps, ironic as it may seem, there might be a need for us to hold an information session with all members of council present so that we can have an unfettered discussion of this with our own legal and clerk staff. And perhaps there may be a specialty firm that we should be engaging to talk about exactly what this means. It's all well and fine for us to do these things and do them to look good or to not look bad in front of the public. But my gosh, people, we're responsible to the corporation as well as the citizens of this city. And I can't see us proceeding with this tonight. I just don't see it being anything other than a rash act that's going to have consequences for us in the very near future. I'll reserve the rest of my remarks for a second opportunity, Mayor. But I think I have a little bit of nervousness and hesitation about doing this, and that's not from thinking about what's going to come at us in the media. It's about thinking what would come at us from claimants that would arise from our in-camera meetings, which, by the way, some of which we're mandated to do, some of which we choose to do because it's in the best interest of the corporation.
Yeah, I have similar. I wasn't here during the first debate. As someone who practiced law and who was involved in litigation, I know exactly the risk it puts us at. But there's pluses and minuses. The plus is, well, first of all, for the public to think that they would have free access to recordings of in-camera meetings. I mean, the report tells us that's not true because the in-camera restrictions would still apply. So it would be obviously a benefit to the Privacy Commissioner in terms of determining whether or not a session was properly held in camera. And I agree there is a value to that, not only because it gives the person investigating that more information, but it also it has an effect on the councils to make sure that if they're going in camera, that they've got reasons to do it and that their discussion is appropriately limited for the reason for going in camera. But there is a downside to this, and the downside that I can fully appreciate as a lawyer, because the rules that a court uses in determining whether or not something should be disclosed, the Freedom of Information Act and the in-camera provisions in Municipal Act, that doesn't mean anything to a court. A court has its own set of rules, and we may be setting ourselves up where the material is being released to an opposing party in a lawsuit that we might have thought, well, no, it won't be because it's properly in camera. But it's a wholly different set of rules that a court deals with. And you may find we're getting into litigation or disputes where really, in essence, we're tying ourselves with one arm behind our back. We're giving the other side a tremendous advantage because they're going to be able to get access to material that we likewise wouldn't get from the other side. The other side won't be releasing video recording of their strategy sessions. So that I know as a lawyer, that's a significant risk that the corporation is put to. The problem I have is I'm not here as a lawyer to give advice, but in my background, I understand the risk. That the difficulty I have is the report really addresses that we have in front of us from staff, kind of it's a small little paragraph. And I'm wondering if the legal staff can provide us with a more fulsome memo material, whatever it is, how everything is appropriate, so that we make the decision on this, which would be at the council meeting, we're making it fully appreciated of the potential risks to the corporation. Not to us individually, but to the corporation.
Through you, Mayor Davis, legal staff would be happy to provide a confidential memorandum in advance of the council meeting.
Yeah, I think we need to hear that part of it. And certainly I would appreciate hearing that. I need to hear that to be able to make a fully informed decision on this one. So, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, one of my concerns is site plan approval meetings where we have a developer or builder sit at a meeting. It's not in camera, but it is confidential. And I wonder how that would if that would apply to what's being proposed.
Through the chair, it will only apply to meetings of council and its committees. Those, I believe you're referencing staff meetings. It wouldn't apply to the staff meetings, just meetings under the Municipal Act of Council.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to get a lot more debate and information on this first. It's a little bit more complex than what it seems, and so I prefer to get more information before I vote on this. Thank you.
Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Kim, I think. When we're talking about information being used differently in court, so I presume minutes of an in-camera meeting could be used, correct?
They could be, yes.
Okay, and so I guess as I'm thinking this through some of the reasons that we're talking about why some of this information might be pulled, I think things like, I think a lot of it will show in the minutes themselves, but when you're running into items like code of conduct, I don't know how that shows up in minutes unless, even if specific language was used. So I can see where the camera or the audio is more beneficial in that regard. But for some of these legal or the litigation proceedings, there's still paperwork that could be pulled. So I am hearing the concerns, but I just think it doesn't capture everything because our minutes are designed to be minutes. They're designed to kind of capture the essence of the meeting. So thank you for that, Kim. I just wanted to make sure about that.
Jeff, Jeff was there and Jeff disappeared.
Yes, through the mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't want to jump in and volunteer additional information, but there's a fundamental difference between a video recording and the minutes. The minutes are designed to be a quick, short summary. The video is going to have far more prejudicial information if we're talking about litigation strategy, if we're talking about labor relations, if we're talking about whether we are or not going to sell a piece of land and what the value of that is going to be. The record that's going to be recorded will be far more useful to an adversary than the minutes would be. The other thing the minutes would require is there'd be a record. So typically you would require a witness who would be favorable to the city to go to present as a witness, to put the document through the witness to get it into evidence. It becomes a little bit less appealing if you don't know what that witness is going to say, if you are an adversary. If you have a video recording, it's really very clear what has been said, and it makes it very difficult to take an alternate position. So the record, because it's less detailed, has a different impact from a litigation perspective. I just wanted to make that distinction clear in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about records.
Councilor Toski. Councilor Slass.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I certainly have nothing to hide, and I'm not concerned with anybody finding out what I've said. But I think it's become apparent to me this evening that there's a lot more legally to this than I certainly understand, and a lot more legally to this than I'm going to understand when we're done discussing this evening. Mr. Mayor, you've asked for a confidential memo to be circulated. I don't think that's enough. I'm going to have to read that in isolation and then pick up a phone. I'm not going to hear anybody else's questions. I'm only going to know what I thought or what concerned me or didn't concern me to be able to question our legal folks with. What I would suggest or what I would ask is that we have, this sounds crazy, but an in-camera meeting to get legal opinion on this prior to City Council. I would feel much more comfortable knowing what legal ground we stand on. And because of the current goings on in this city, everybody's going to be thinking that this is all about that. And it's got really nothing or very little to do with that. This has to do with negotiating contracts, union contracts with employees. It's got to do with selling property. It's got to do with legal positions on things that could very well become public, I think. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. I guess, Mr. Mayor, you have that advantage. I don't have that advantage, but I do have access to lawyers that work for the corporation. And I would very much like to be able to sit in a group, all of council there, to be able to quiz the lawyers and get the answers to things that are maybe on my mind, and hear the answers to things that my mind didn't pick up on, but somebody else's mind did. And I think having that wholesome discussion prior to, this isn't to try and hold it up. This is simply to try and get that information before a final decision is made at council in November. So I don't know how I go about requesting an in-camera meeting to get legal opinion on this, but I'll leave that with you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we can during a meeting actually take a motion to go in camera, but Kim, do you having to help us with on that issue that Councillor Sluss has raised?
Just some information, Your Worship, with respect to availability of timing before the November meeting. There really isn't enough time to have the in-camera meeting heard prior to the council meeting at the end of the month. But yes, there is an opportunity to go in camera if that is it at this point. And we can also, there is an opportunity for us to bring an in-camera report on November the 9th, although there is that opportunity as well.
Well, we could go in camera on the council meeting in November. So if someone deems it appropriate and they want that information. So, but I'm hoping at least you can provide us a memorandum. We can decide what to do with it from there.
Certainly, yes, the memorandum would be fine. I believe that there is some scheduling concerns with respect to an in-camera meeting prior to the council meeting.
All right, Councillor Carpenter.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to wrap as my right, and I'd like to provide some clarity, some options for what I've heard from members of council too. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you can. Well, actually, the mover of a motion actually wraps. You haven't actually moved this, but I'll accept that you want to speak last. But I think we got a couple that would like to speak second go around. Okay, so we got Councillor McCreary.
Sorry about that, Mayor. I'd like to introduce a referral.
Referrals. Refer is appropriate at any time. So tell us what your motion is.
I would move an amendment to refer this to an educational session to be held at a date to be determined by legal staff, and for the purposes of education and discussion of the issues pertaining to the item before us, Mayor. And I'd be looking to get a seconder. I see I have one. And I'll just address it very briefly, Mayor, as one can speak to a referral. A number of us have expressed concerns here, and it's not to diminish the ideological justness of what's before us, but I think we also have to consider the practicalities. And I think, as Councillor Sluss so eloquently said, we probably should have that in a format where we can all hear each other's questions and interact with one another, and base this on the practicalities of what's before us, based on the resolution and the amendment provided by Councillor Carpenter.
All right, to the motion to refer, Councillor Wall, to the referral.
Yeah, I had other questions, but I don't think that they're germane. Okay. No, I want to ask about the referral.
Yeah.
Is this referral intended? I don't know who I'm asking. Is this referral intended to be something that we're doing then in camera, or is this referral intended to be something we're doing publicly?
I'll attempt to answer that, but I think it'll depend on what the advice is. It could be the advice from our solicitor giving us a legal opinion and in accordance with the rules that could go in camera, but that would require a motion to do that. And we'd have majority of us have to agree that yes, it would appropriately go in camera to receive that information. So difficulty is not knowing exactly what it is that'll be coming to us, who it is that's giving it to us. But I assume it'd probably be the lawyers, and it may be that they determine that their advice is that it can be dealt with in public or not. So it's a little bit hard to know at this.
Sorry, Mayor Davis. Can you amend a referral?
Yeah, only for the direction that you're giving staff, right? Because a
So
referral.
I'm going to propose an amendment that if we're doing this educational and I don't know the wording in the amendment, I'd like to incorporate a Let's Talk Brantford element where we ask the public whether or not we should be recording in camera meetings. If we're doing the informational thing for us, we should do the informational thing for them.
It would have to, are you moving that as a member? Or are you asking to me if it would be incorporated into the motion to refer?
Either or.
All right, so Councilor Curry, you got that request?
I always find it hard to say no to Councillor Wall.
Yeah, okay. So that's included. Anything else, Councilor Wall, in the motion to refer?
This is, I don't know, this is very important to me. One of the reasons I ran for council was for transparency in government.
All right, Councilor Wall to the referral.
Well, I'm very excited about this referral so that we can get more information about it. I'm thankful for the discussion that we've had here today. And this is something I'm thankful we're doing.
Okay. To the referral, Councilor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have it on my screen, but I think the original motion that's being referred was approving to do this, but it's subject to going to estimates and surviving the estimates process. So that being the case, I don't think there's any rush. We don't need a meeting prior to council. It can be approved at council. It can be approved anywhere, but it has to be approved at estimates or it dies on the floor because there's no funding to do it. So I think there is ample time. I don't think we have to refer this. I think we can vote on it, accept it, reject it, do whatever you're going to do with it. But if it's, I would presume it would be approved and would go to estimates. And then it hits another series of questioning and judging at that point to simply get funding to implement. So if you can't implement it, it doesn't become so. So I think you get to that point. We've got lots of time to have the information discussion with the legal folks and to learn all about it. But I think I don't think we need to refer it. It's being referred in the original resolution to go to estimates, being referred to estimates. And I think that's where you need to be equipped with all you need to know about this subject before you approve any funding to implement. So I'm comfortable with voting it up or down this evening and again at council, but with the proviso that we do get the education piece between now and when it's dealt with at estimates, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Councilor Carpenter to the referral.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notwithstanding what my good friend Councillor Sless has said, I wouldn't want it to go to estimates and fail simply on a funding issue. And I seconded it because I think my colleague Councillor McCreary and I are on opposite ends of this debate, and I thought it would be appropriate that I seconded it in the first place to get further information, because I'm not trying to do something untowards to council. I'm trying to be an open as transparent as we can. And I think it is important that we get all the legal information to make sure that we do protect the city and the employees that work for us and the public at large. So I'm not trying to do anything untowards here. I just want to get all the information about why other municipalities are doing it, maybe get some information why they're doing it and how they're handling it, what implications have happened to them over the years and so forth. So I'm happy to second it and get a fulsome report by our legal, and which will also include, I'm sure, how other municipalities are handling it. So again, not trying to do anything untoward, and I thought it'd be appropriate that I seconded my colleague's motion to refer for more information. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor McCreary. Second
Mayor,
go
thank
around
you.
of referral.
Thank you. Certainly no member of this council, no individual member of this council would do anything to harm the corporation. And seeking this educational piece is to simply ensure that we don't do anything inadvertently to harm the corporation. Councilor Wall speaks volumes about transparency, and I agree completely. As I said, though, I think practicality needs to be considered beyond ideology. It's very refreshing that Councilor Carpenter and I, at two ends of the debate here, are in agreement that the best thing that can happen is that we can get more info and make reasonable, intelligent decisions rather than, basing our votes on what the public might think. So I hope everybody will support this. It's, it'll go to estimates later, but the information we get will allow us to make an intelligent decision on this. And that's what we're supposed to do here.
So I'll call the motion and referral, which applies to both the amendment and the base motion, which is received. So, okay.
Could we get a wording of what we're voting on, just for clarification, please?
Through the chair, I wasn't able to capture the wording.
Would the mayor, I'm guessing the mayor is trying to say, would I like to restate it?
Because I thought well, can you restate it to help the deputy clerk?
Yes, I'm always pleased to help the clerk. That this item be referred to an educational session to be arranged by planning and clerk staff at a date to be advised by staff.
And does that include the Lex Talk Brantford request?
It does indeed, yes.
Okay. Okay. I think that's, I think we got the intent. Mr. Deputy Clerk, you got it? Yep, okay. All right, we can have the vote on that, please.
The referral of item 6.1.6 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Van der Steldt, and Mayor Davis.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to state, I mean, I would have voted yes, but I didn't actually vote on that, so I don't know if.
Neither did I.
Okay.
Neither did I.
Yeah, can we redo that then? There's some uncertainty.
Item 6.1.6 carries unanimously. The referral of item 6.1.6 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Van der Steldt, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, so we have one item left. We don't have any notices of motion or.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Mayor, a technical point of order. Two members of a council didn't vote for something, but the vote was found in the affirmative. Can we make sure that our IT staff or Julia is aware that that just happened? I certainly wouldn't want to see that happen again at a crucial point in our voting history. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll certainly look into that. So we've got one item left then, and that's 7.3. It's a resolution Councillor Antosky would like to bring forward. So Councillor Antosky, please read your resolution and name your second.
Thank you, Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Carpenter. Whereas the City of Brantford continues to mourn the loss of our beloved Lord Mayor Walter Gretzky, who passed away on March 4th, 2021. And whereas Walter was named the City of Brantford's first and only Lord Mayor on February 19th, 2007, in honor of his countless contributions as an advocate for community organizations and passionate ambassador of our city. And whereas Walter was endeared to many across Canada, the world, and in his hometown of Brantford, and will forever be remembered as a beloved member of his community who selflessly dedicated countless hours to coaching youth and supporting Brantford's local charities. And whereas not only will Walter always be remembered as a beloved father, friend, coach, mentor, and neighbor, he will also forever be known for championing this community at every opportunity. And whereas in his role as Lord Mayor of Brantford, Walter was a tireless ambassador for our city and huge supporter of youth hockey and sports in our community. And whereas Walter was an integral part of the city's minor hockey community and affectionately known as Canada's favorite hockey dad, and whereas the city wishes to continue to pay tribute to Walter, that staff be directed to consult with the Gretzky family to investigate their interest in converting the designated Walter Gretzky parking spot at the Wayne Gretzky Sports Centre into a space that memorializes and recognizes Walter's contribution to minor hockey, as has been suggested by members of the community, and report back by the end of the year. And Mr. Mayor, this is one of the items that had been on a list of lots of different suggestions on how to honor Walter, and some of them were more time sensitive than this. So I just wanted to bring this back to the list. We've had some community members ask about it, and I think for all of the people who frequent the Gretzky Center, it's a really it could be a wonderful reminder of his legacy.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Antosky for adding this another wonderful tribute to our dear Walter Gretzky, and it's just I think the family will be very pleased and honoured to see their father honoured again in this way. So thank you.
Not seeing any further discussion. Mr. Deputy Clerk, please take the vote on this.
Item 7.3, memorialization of Walter Gretzky parking spot at Wayne Gretzky Sports Center carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Marn, Sless, Vanderstelt, and Mayor Davis.
So there are no notices of motion. That means the meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Right, good meeting.